The webcast is live. Over to the chairman of the Planning Committee, Councillor Richard Dallin.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to you all. Welcome to the January meeting of the South Northamptonshire Council Planning Committee. We start, as is customary, with our apologies for absence and any appointment of substitute members, and I call on Leslie Farrell from our Democratic Services organisation. Leslie?
Oh, thank you, Chairman. We don't have any apologies for absence this afternoon. We have the full committee.
Thank you very much. Item 2, declarations of interest. And this is where members are asked to declare any interest and the nature of their interest, which they may have in any of the items under consideration at this meeting. Go first, Councillor Bignell.
Yes, Chairman, I'd like to wish to declare a personal non-pecuniary interest in agenda item 5. I will not take part in the debate or vote. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Samiotis.
I don't think she's actually in the meeting yet, Chairman.
I can see her on my screen.
Oh, can you? Oh, yes, she's got her arm up.
If you could unmute your microphone just to... Go ahead. Councillor Samiotis?
She's frozen. I think we'll just give her a second to...
All right.
Unfreeze.
We will. Perhaps, I know that I see Councillor Hollowell's hand up as well. Go to him next then, please.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Hollowell?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Thanks. I'm declaring my normal interest on all matters concerned with archaeology as member of the Northampton Archaeological Committee.
Thank you very much. Councillor Samiotis, can we go to you again? I think you wish to declare an interest.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Brilliant. Yes, a non-pecuniary interest in item 5. As chair of Toastertown Football Club, I'm going to be leaving the meeting for that item.
Thank you very much indeed. We now go to item 3 on this afternoon's agenda, which is to confirm the minutes of the meeting that we held virtually on the 3rd of December 2020. Taking it that you've read the minutes, are you agreeable to them being signed as a correct record of what took place? If you raise your hands to that effect, I'm obliged. Thank you very much indeed. And in the nature of the world in which we now are in, I will sign those minutes physically in due course, but they will be signed as a correct record for posterity. Thank you very much. Item 4, Chairman's announcements. Well, once again and forevermore, before this council ceases to exist, I hasten to predict, we will be meeting virtually. But the one advantage of things now that we are able to have public speakers actually coming on screen and talking to us live and in a position then to answer any questions that members may have. And this will take place for both our items on this afternoon's agenda. I would ask that all of you mute your microphones and only unmute them when invited by me as chairman to speak. And also make sure that any mobile phones that may be near you are kept on mute throughout the afternoon whilst we are meeting. Thank you. So if we may now go on to the first of our planning applications for this particular meeting. And this is listed as item 5 on your agenda, land to the east of Sheffield Road and to the northwest of Gate 3 Toaster. And I'll call upon the case officer, Andrew Longbottom, to talk us through this application. Mr. Longbottom.
We're just letting the speakers into the meeting, Chairman. Won't be a moment.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, yes, just to sort of explain to those of you watching, we do have public speakers, which I've already mentioned. They are being invited into the meeting. They will not be speaking or saying anything until invited by me. And in some cases, those who are simply assisting the speakers will only be saying anything if asked a specific question, for example, related to transport, be it whatever it may be, and then I will call upon them. I will name tag them at the appropriate moment. So I've already given him a little mention. Let's give him another mention and introduce Andrew Longbottom, who is our case officer, who will talk us through this particular application. Andrew.
Thank you, Chairman. Just let me share my screen with you. Can you confirm you're seeing the plans?
That's fine.
Thank you. So the site is a 34-hectare area of land in blue shown on the plans and is allocated under policy AL3 of the new local plan for business, general industrial, warehouse and distribution uses, as well as ancillary uses. The plan shows the application site and the main planning constraints of the area. These being the dotted line here is the town confines. You have the hatched area in blue here, which is a special landscape area, and the Eastern Neston Historic Park and Garden, and the area in shaded pink is the Eastern Neston Conservation Area. There's an area here of historic landfill, and the hatched area here is an area which is allocated as being a potential wildlife site. There are a number of footpaths in the area, which you can see, one of them which goes across the site in the southwest corner, and there are other footpaths here to the north of the site, and another one here to the southwest of the site which crosses the A43 and comes out onto the old Tiffield Road. In green, we have the disused railway line, which is now allocated as a green corridor. We have some nearby residential properties. We have the Brickyard farm here, which is also a commercial dog kennels. You have a Williams farm here, and just off the plan here, you have a third lodge. If I just move up to the plan here and just zoom in on that view, so it shows the context of where we are in the district. You've got Caldecott slightly to the north-northeast, and to the north you have Tiffield. Approximately from the centre of the site to the centre of Tiffield is around about 1.3 kilometres. In terms of topography of the site, this is probably about the highest point of the site, and this is the lowest point of the site, and that falls around about 21 metres across the site. This railway bank here is an embankment, which is around about sort of 4 metres above the road level of Tiffield Road here. And the western parcel here is a sort of natural bowl. This boundary here forms a boundary with the Bell Plantation site, which is another allocation for commercial development within the new Part 2 local plan. So this is the parameters plan for the site. And the application is a hybrid application in that it requests full planning permission for part of the development and outline planning permission for the remainder. The part of the application that requests full planning permission is the essential infrastructure and includes the new construction of the roundabout on the A43, the construction of a new spine road to the site and the lighting that goes with that, and the realignment of the Tiffield Road Donkey Lane, the construction of a new footpath along the side of the Northampton Road, along with some traffic calming measures and a new 2 metre wide pedestrian footpath and cycleway. There's also amendments to the A43 Tiffield Road Donkey Lane junction, which means that becomes a left in and left out junction only, and with that central reservation closing. Also included in the full application is the construction of the levels for the terraces for the development to be built upon, and the construction of the surface water attenuation feature, which is in the southwest corner, and the majority of the structural landscaping around the periphery of the site. The outline part of the application is for all matters for future consideration and applies for up to 102,400 square metres of commercial development, consisting of a mix of 100,000 square metres of light industrial, general industrial, warehouse and distribution uses, 2,400 square metres of standalone office uses, 1,000 square metres of restaurant and retail uses, 1,000 square metres of showroom petrol filling station uses. And in line with policy AL3, 30% of the developable site area will be for light industrial and general industrial uses. The parameters plan, which is currently on the screen, would form part of any planning permission, and any subsequent reserved matters application would need to be in accordance with this plan. So just running through the different zones which the site is split into. First of all, you have Zone A, which is this area here. And this is for the smaller retail, restaurant, car showroom and petrol filling station uses. Also allowed in this area will be industrial uses and office uses. The max height of the buildings would be 12 metres to the ridge. This is area Zone B of the site. And this will be developed with 2 to 5 units with industrial uses and warehouse uses with a maximum height to the ridge of 15 metres. Zone C, which is the largest of the zones, will be developed with 2 to 5 units with industrial and warehouse uses with a maximum height of 21 metres to the ridge. And Zone D, which is proposed to be the second phase of development, and will be developed with 1 to 12 units with industrial and warehouse uses with a maximum height of 15 metres to the ridge. It's intended this area is developed for smaller units, which is a demand for locally, and this would be secured through the Section 106 agreement. With regard to footpaths, it is proposed a footpath that runs through the southwest corner of the site, which we saw on the previous plan, will be stopped up, and a new route will be provided instead along the Spine Road, across a pedestrian crossing here, which is signalised, and down the Northampton Road. And the footpath which runs through Zone D would be diverted to allow that development parcel to come forwards. But these will be subject to a separate application to the council at a later date. So there are 2 master plans being submitted by the applicant, one which we call the multi-unit scheme, and another which we call the single unit scheme, which hopefully will be obvious after I've run through them. This is what we call the multi-unit scheme. And for Zone A, this shows a drive-through restaurant and a petrol filling station stroke shop. Zone B shows a split into 2 industrial units. Whilst Zone C is shown as being 3 individual units. And Zone D, the smaller units, 12 of those in total. Turning next to the so it's a single unit scheme. The main difference is, as we saw in Zone C, there were 3 units. 2 of those units amalgamated to create 1. So one of the main challenges of the site is the topography. And as I said earlier, the site falls from 21 metres from about this point to this point here in the southwest corner. And this creates a difficulty in accommodating these units because they need large flat areas of land for these to be developed. As a result, the proposed land levels in the southwest corner are about 4.5 metres above existing land level for the multi-use scheme, and about 6 metres above existing land levels in the single unit scheme. And this is illustrated in the cross sections. So there are 2 cross sections to the site. Section AA, which we're probably most interested in, and this is the top one, which we zoom in on. This is the multi-unit scheme, and you can see how the cut and fill works across the site. So cutting and filling to create the middle unit, but then when you get to the units which stretch into the more to the southwest corner, you can see there's more of a build-up of the land levels. And this is for the multi-unit scheme. When you cross to the single unit scheme, you see the cut and fill is more exaggerated, and you get a higher land level at this point to create that single terrace to build the building on. So turning now to the roads which form part of the full application, having a look at those in more detail. So this consists of the new roundabout on the A43. Obviously, there's quite a large community safety implication for this. There's been quite a number of accidents at this junction. It's quite a difficult junction to navigate at the moment, as you have to sit within the central reservation. And there have been a number of serious accidents at this point, and including 1 fatality. And this roundabout will obviously help a great deal in resolving that situation. We will have a signalised pedestrian crossing on it, which I'll just trying to zoom in and show in a bit more detail. So you've got a signalised pedestrian crossing here. You've got the new Spine Road running through the development, which includes a bus turning loop for when the bus service is diverted into the site, and the staggering of the Tiffield Road, Donkey Lane, the western side of the site. And again, the stopping up of the central turn into the Difffield Road, Donkey Lane, with a left in, left out only, again, so a large community safety implication there as well, because I think there have been some accidents at that junction also. In terms of Northampton Road, again, the additional footpath on the side of the road with that includes a cycleway. The roundabout itself has 3 lanes in, and to help the traffic flow through it, which creates larger traffic loads obviously than it would be if it was just 2 lanes. The proposal also includes some traffic calming along Northampton Road with 2 build outs. First of these is outside number 2 Herbert Gardens, which is shown here, and this means that traffic coming into the town has to give way to traffic coming out of the town, which helps to slow traffic down. It also provides an additional crossing point for pedestrians at these points. The second one proposed outside number 63 Northampton Road, again, which has a pedestrian crossing point, and this one, the traffic going out has to give way to traffic coming in. The objectives of this is to slow traffic down and also to make the route less attractive for non-local traffic. Also, as part of the traffic calming, there are 2 proposals for puffing crossings which we need to select one from. This is the more northerly of the 2 options. As set out in the report, it provides an additional traffic light crossing on Northampton Road, and this has the advantage of being outside the area that floods, which would be a problem with the more southern one. However, it doesn't have the same footpath connectivity that the southern option would. However, you could create, just zoom in a bit more. You could create some more connections from this truck crossing along the south side of the car park, which does connect into the footpath network. The second option is the southern option, which does connect quite nicely into the existing network of footpaths. However, this has a disadvantage of this area flooding on occasion, and so this footpath does on occasion become impassable. Turning now to landscaping. So the full application also includes the majority of the landscaping on the boundary of the site, which can be seen on the plan. There is a significant area of landscaping to the southwest corner where the surface water attenuation feature will be, and there's a proposed additional structural planting and hedgerow enhancement along the continuation of the Donkey Lane Difffield Road. Along the north boundary of the site, there's also buffer planting proposed between the development and the Williams barn, and there's also additional planting along the northern boundary, which separates the site from the agricultural land to the north here and here. This area land is a large spinney, so it doesn't really need any landscape enhancement at this point. There's also further landscape enhancement along this north-east boundary, which enhances the existing hedgerow. And also there's a proposed significant buffer planting along the southern boundary of the site, along the A43. So looking at it in more detail, we've got some cross sections to show you, but there's quite some significant land levels changes. So this is sort of the north west corner of the site, and this is Donkey Lane, Difffield Road here, and then you've got the existing hedgerow here, and then you've got the build up of the existing site levels. So the red line is the existing land level, and you've got the what would be the land level for the multi-use scheme and the land level for the single unit scheme, which you can see there's a difference. This is really a pinch point of the site where the built form does encroach quite close to the road, and therefore you need this supporting structure, which is quite heavily landscaped, then with some landscaping to the top of the feature. And then there's a need for some acoustic fencing along this part of the site to deal with noise from the site reaching the Brickyard Kennels site, so that is masked to a certain degree with climbing plants along the acoustic screen. Going further down Tifffield Road, Donkey Lane, this gets away from the pinch point. As you see, there's a lot more space here for landscaping. This part of the attenuation feature, and then again you've got these different levels depending on which of the two schemes come forwards, multi-unit scheme and single unit scheme, and the embankment here. And you can see we said in the report, there's concern about the landscaping. It's not really been up to standard yet. As you can see, there isn't really any different landscaping scheme depending on which particular scheme comes forward. The landscaping isn't really reaching the base ground level for the single unit scheme, which is of concern to officers. So it doesn't really help much in landscaping that built form. And this is some of the issues that we need to address still with the applicant. Again, going further down Tifffield Road, Donkey Lane, you've got the road here, and this is probably the widest part of the site where you've got the attenuation features, and again the embankment up towards the site. And here you can see the existing land levels and the two different land levels depending on which schemes come forwards. So this starts looking at the cross section between the site and the A43. So this is the A43 here. We just pick that up, and they've got quite an existing screen of landscaping on the side of that road. And again, across the land levels, there is a need for a retaining feature here and some limited landscaping on top of that feature. But as you progress further along the A43, the land levels seem to equalize out more, and that is less of an issue. There's more room for landscaping as you progress along the road. Again, this is the A43, and the site is starting to flatten out, and there isn't such marked land level differences. This is the existing landscaping and additional proposed landscaping along the roadside. Again, further along the A43. And this is again more up towards the area where the roundabout is. You can see the land levels do start to change again somewhat. So this is the northeast corner of the site where you've got the existing hedgerow, and the existing planting is supplemented by additional tree planting. And moving to the north boundary of the site, this is the sort of cross section where the existing spinney is, and you can see there's some area of retaining structures here where the actual site's on lower level than the existing land levels. And this increases again further along the north boundary, where there's more of a marked dip in the land levels and more planting along the northern boundary. And the final cross section, we're sort of back to, beg your pardon, this is the cross section near Williams Barn, where there's some more additional planting along the northern boundary. And the final cross section, again, we're back to Tifffield Road, Donkey Lane, where you have the road shown here, and the actual development is at a lower level than the existing road. So in terms of not being able to do a site visit, I've taken some photographs, and hopefully this is helpful to members. This is a site taken looking from Tifffield Road, Donkey Lane, looking up the hill. This is the Williams Barn here. You've got the A43 along this boundary here, and hopefully that shows some of the land level differences that occur across the site. This is looking from the highest point of the site, looking down towards Tifffield Road, Donkey Lane, and the A43 along this part of the site here. And again, from the highest point of the site, this is the northeast boundary, and you've got the area where the roundabout will be going in around about here. And this is the A43, and this is the old soldier spinney here. And this is zone D, which is sort of the zone on the western side of the Donkey Lane, Tiffield Road, and you've got Caldecott in this direction here, and it shows the sort of natural bowl that this area sits within. And this is Donkey Lane, Tiffield Road as it is at the moment. And you see there's quite some substantial planting here already, but obviously that needs to be reinforced where there's been some dieback in recent years. And this is the Holcott turning on the A43 where the new roundabout will be located. And also this vegetation here will need to be removed for that to facilitate that. And now we move to some of the CGIs which have been provided by the applicant, which show what the development might look like coming forwards. This is taken from the A43 looking north towards the site. This is the multi-unit scheme. What we've encouraged the developer to do is go for the graded building approach, so the colours grade from a darker colour at the base to a lighter colour at the top of the building. So it helps to sort of fit it in with when it's viewed against the skyline. And this is the single unit scheme, which again is a bit higher, but it's actually set further back from the A43. And this is how the roundabout junction will look. Obviously, this is how the development might come forward. It's indicative only at this time. All these designs of buildings will be subject to reserve matters applications at a future date. And this is the view from the playground in the Shires estate, and this is obviously taken during the winter time when there aren't any leaves on the trees, and you can see just between the gaps in the trees, you can see the development, just the top of the development there against the skyline. And this is another picture taken near the Williams Barn entrance road and looking into the site, and this is Donkey Lane, Tiffield Road, and this is how the development might come forwards. And this is a panorama shot which shows how the buildings might look from the northern direction. So you've got Williams Barns here, and this is open agricultural fields. And again, sort of the light grey of the buildings and the light coloured roofs against the skyline. So as set out in the report, the land is allocated for development in policy AL3, and officers consider that the development is in accordance with that policy, and there are no other material considerations which warrant a decision not in accordance with the development plan. However, there are a number of planning matters which still need to be resolved, and these are set out in the recommendation and relate to sustainability, landscaping, lighting, the framework travel plan, how the different uses of the site will be achieved on design work on the A43, and construction traffic and the modelling of HG movements for B8 uses. The applications have indicated to the council that they are willing to work with us to resolve the outstanding matters, and the report recommends that the application is approved with delegated powers given to the Assistant Director of Economy and Planning to issue the planning permission once these matters have been resolved and subject to a Section 106 agreement and conditions, and the final drafting of which are also delegated. As set out in the report, there are planning impacts to the development, however the development also includes a number of positive impacts, including 1,500 new full-time jobs, 700 of which will be taken within the district. It includes £100 million expenditure in construction and £60 million per annum into the regional economy, and also considerable safety improvements to the Holcott turn and the Tiffield turn on the A43. The application is recommended for approval on this basis, as set out in the report, and delegated to Assistant Director for Planning and the Economy. In addition, I would like to make it clear to the committee that We have today with us Steve Clark, an independent highways consultant who's able to answer any questions members may have on highway matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. If you could revert your screen, thank you. As Andrew Longbottom said, there is an opportunity for specific transport questions to be directed to the independent transport consultant. Before I open to questions, I have two questions I'd like to put. The first one is that in your report, you say there is much yet to hear from the highways authorities concerning the development that is before us today. Some might think that perhaps it is before us rather too previously, and we should hear more from the highways before full consideration. What is your response to that?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, there are some issues relating to the highways issues, particularly the modelling of the B8 HG movements, and also from Highways England regarding construction traffic, and also looking at the design of the A43 roundabout and also the roundabout on the A43. However, these are seen as being sort of technical issues which we need to resolve with them rather than being fundamental issues of principle. And we don't believe that that prevents the council from considering the application today.
All right, thank you. Well, the second question is perhaps more appropriately answered by Jim Newton, the Assistant Director of Planning and Economy. Discussions have been going on with the applicants for some time now, prior to the adoption of the Local Plan Part 2A. I wondered, perhaps for clarification, you could tell us what came first. Would SNC have gone along with this particular location for employment had the applicant that we're discussing this afternoon not suggested it might be an appropriate place for their employment site? Could you answer that one?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I certainly can. Yeah, the site has been around in draft plan since before IM Properties approached me around the details about how that could be developed. So the first time that the site was published in a local plan document as a potential site allocation, it wasn't in IM Properties ownership at that time. They came along after the draft allocation was published. So from my point of view, that's how it would normally go. I think if there's a site being promoted, and then an appropriate developer would pick it up at some point along the process, and IM Properties they picked it up fairly early in the process, which allowed us to negotiate a lot of the benefits that Mr. Longbottom's just outlined around the safety to the highways and other positive elements to this application that I personally welcome IM Properties' approach that they've taken to positive negotiation with me throughout this the process of the application and before the application.
So it was always the intention this location would be appropriate for employment, whatever company might come along and say they'd like to construct something there.
Well, yes, I think as from a local plan point of view, we look at whether a site is suitable, whether it's appropriate, and whether it's developable. And so from my point of view, I'm very pleased that a site's come forward so quickly, because in my head, that means that we picked the right site, because we now have a developer who has a track record of developing these kinds of sites, who's come on board very early in the process, and has decided that they're going to back the plan by coming along and implementing it. So for me, I think this is a very positive step that 6 months after the full council was voted to adopt the local plan, we now have a planning application to start the implementation of that plan that is going to bring jobs and transport improvements and other positive things with it.
Thank you very much. Well, we are in the stage where we can have questions to the case officer or his transport consultant alongside him. Councillor Pritchard, you go first. Opening your microphone, please, if so to do. Still can't hear you.
There we are. Thank you. Go
ahead.
3 or 4 questions. Are there any limitations on the type of industrial activities that will be taking place on the sites?
It is. I mean, there are B8, B2 and B1 units specified within the application, and then they're sort of well set out in planning laws to what they can be used for. So the uses would need to fall within those use classes. Also, when we look at the reserve matters, if there are certain parts of the development which are causing us concern, then conditions can be used at that stage to limit those use once we know more about it. So hopefully that does answer your question.
And also the next thing is with regards to, obviously this is a, you know, a 24/7, 365-day type of activity.
Yeah.
What sort of emphasis is put on with regards to containing noise and also light pollution?
In terms of noise, the consultants have already been started looking at this. They've already identified that the Donkey Lane, Tifford Road needs an acoustic fence to support the application to protect brickyard kennels. So that's already forms part of the application. They're also looking at submitting with their reserve matters noise attenuation measures and a noise survey, which would predict the noise levels, which for us to look at, and that would form part of the reserve matters. And when the individual users come forward, it provides with the more details as to what the likely impacts will be for the noise impacts of a light industrial unit, and the noise impacts of a general industrial unit would be different, and we'd approach those different uses in different ways. So it is partially dealt with at this stage, and it is partially dealt with at future stages.
One of my main concerns, obviously, is with regards to this pedestrian crossing that's been identified. When you look at the speed of some of the traffic that goes along the A43, particularly from the Tove roundabout, don't you think more consideration should have been given to have a pedestrian bridge over the A43 rather than traffic lights?
The local plan policy says the footpaths need to be diverted to a safe crossing point, which is what the applicants have done. They have created a safe crossing point at the roundabout, and that sort of fulfills the needs of the policy. I take the point that it is a little bit further to walk from the centre of the site than perhaps a footbridge would be. However, there's no sort of direct access onto Donkey Lane from the site, and you know, it may not be the members' favoured option, but I think our view is it does fulfil the requirements of the policy.
Would there be any barriers restricting pedestrians from crossing over the A43 other than by the pedestrian crossings?
There's an existing crossing which is at the end of Tiffield Road, Donkey Lane, that footpath crossing would remain as is. So that crossing would still be available for people to use. And
also, with regards to these very large industrial buildings, are there any stipulations with regards to installing solar panels?
The sustainability is one thing that one of the technical documents we don't think is quite there yet, and we've had a response from our sustainability consultant, and we need to do some more work around that. And so, because one of the requirements of the core strategy is to maximise generation on site, and so we need to understand what the limitations of the site are and where that limitation lies, and do some more work with the applicants on that. But it is one thing we know that members are very, very keen on, and you know, we are pushing for that.
Could we have possibly put that in as a condition?
It will be, well, what it will be is it will be a framework provided by the applicants, and then that will then indicate what the needs will be for the reserve matters coming forwards. So,
all right, thank you, Councillor Pritchard. I think you've had about 6 questions there, but never mind. Let's move on, if we may, to Councillor Johns. You've got a question, I think.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I have got some questions. I think hopefully we're having the applicant, I think, this afternoon, aren't we? But
we have
a question to
the officer, yes.
Question to Mr. Longbottom. In terms of to achieve the levels required by this development, does that mean that material will have to be brought on site, or is it a question of moving material around on site? But if it is the former, how much material would have to be brought in? And that's my first question. And second question is more minor. It's in regards to what's suggested as for a pedestrian crossing on Northampton Road. If a southern crossing point was chosen, how would members of the public using the long stay car park get onto the footpath, you know, to access onto the pedestrian crossing? because there's no link currently from the car park onto a footpath, and then your drawing didn't seem to show one.
Thank you. First question about cut and fill. No, they're not proposing to import any material.
Could Mr. Longbottom speak up?
Yes, could you please?
Yeah, sorry. Regard to the first question, the applicants are not proposing to have any any material imported onto the site. So that's as far as I'm aware, that's the situation. With regard to the crossings on Northampton Road, like I said,
Can't hear, Chair.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Andrew. Can you possibly direct your microphone more towards your mouth? Because I think that, well, maybe your beard's getting in the way. Can we just hear a bit more of you?
So with regard to is that better?
Yeah, that's a better. Speak up, please. Yes.
So with regard to the puffing crossings, each one of those two options has its advantages and disadvantages. And I think you're right to pick up on the fact that the southern crossing doesn't have any direct access to the roundabout, but it's for members to decide which one of those two options that it thinks has the most benefits and the least drawbacks.
So the answer for the southern one is there is no link.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Let's leave it on that note for a moment. Councillor Elaine Wiltshire.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is directed at Andrew Longbottom. In the document 7.23, Highways England are holding an objection to the size of the roundabout and also the design of it, and saying that severe reserve for the curves on the roundabout on exit. Now we have problems up at Evenley roundabout with the size of the roundabout, with lorries landing on top of it. We've had problems in the past with the roundabout down at Baynard's Green and further down the A43 with lorries falling over. Can we guarantee that this roundabout is going to be of a good size for the size of the lorries that are going round it, side by side? Because there have been a number of accidents, and mostly because of the lorries not being able to get round the roundabout carefully without hitting something on the inside lane. So can you let us know whether or not this has been updated, please?
Thank you. There are still outstanding design works to be done on this roundabout, and there are some what we probably think is some minor...
We still can't hear you, I'm afraid, Andrew. It says speak as loudly as you can.
So there are still some design works to be done on this roundabout, and these are relatively minor and relate to the curbing of it. But we wouldn't be issuing a decision until the Highways England are satisfied that these issues have been fully addressed.
All right. Are there any other questions to the officer at this point before we move on? I can't see any. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Councillor Hollowell, you just put your hand up as I move to the other screen. Go ahead.
Two questions, though I am struggling to hear, Andrew. The first thing, I'm trying to catch up on the updates because I didn't get them sent to me.
We've just lost your sound, Stephen.
Just muted yourself.
Councillor Hollowell, you're muted. Sorry.
I'll put it on permanent.
Yes, it's gone off again. Yeah, better.
Okay, yeah, it's on permanent now. So, right, the Local Transport Infrastructure Fund, it starts at the bottom of page 13. And then at the top of page 14, so I've only just, I might have got this wrong, but because I've only just seen it, but the big paragraph in the middle or just above middle, it says, referring to the fund, this is not a requirement of the highway authorities, and SNC's transport consultant has confirmed that the fund is not necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms. And then skipping goes on, it does not meet the SIL tests and should therefore not be included within the Section 106 agreement. It should therefore not be given any weight by the committee in reaching a decision. Then there is some information some new information supplied by the applicant. And then at the end, in italics, you've written, conversations have been held with the local highway authority and the council's own transport consultant, who are both of the view that the fund is necessary to make the development acceptable in highway terms. It is considered that the most appropriate way forward would be for a bond to be deposited, which could be used for additional measures if required. So the question is, I mean, is it necessary or not? Or should we be taking consideration of this or not?
Yeah, the applicants gave an opinion that it shouldn't be included within the planning permission. And then after a discussion with them, they changed their view. So the latest section of the updates is a more up-to-date view from the applicants, and they are now accepting that this additional fund is necessary. And so there isn't any conflict between us and the applicants on this matter. And what they're proposing is a bond of up to £100,000 for potential additional highway works at a later stage. Now, at this stage, we haven't consulted the local highway authority on this, as this only arrived last night. So we are saying as officers that this additional fund is necessary. And once we've had the opportunity, we will be consulting with the local highway authority to make sure this fund is properly administered and properly funded to make sure it is fit for purpose.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions from anyone at this point? No, well, in that case, we'll go to our public speakers, and in the order, as is customary, go first to the Town or Parish Council, and I'm delighted to see on my screen in front of me John Beasley, who's Chairman of Tiffield Parish Council. Good afternoon, Mr. Beasley. You have 3 minutes in which to make your remarks, and then if you stand by, because there may be a question or two that the members would like to ask you. So if you'd like to unmute your microphone and do that first before I give you the... Everyone? Yes, you have. Good. Yeah, that's fine. If you'd like to go ahead, we're from Parish Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I trust that you've all read the letter of objection from Tiffield Parish Council. It would take too long for me to go through all the grounds for objection contained within it. So I'll just concentrate on 3. The first is the need for the development. We are in an area of low unemployment. Most jobs created here will be filled by workers commuting from outside the local area, creating even more congestion. Your report says of the 1,064 jobs here, only about 540, about a third, will be taken by Towcester residents. This is in direct contravention to achieving the Joint Core Strategy modal shift targets away from car use. We live in an area being quickly surrounded by developments similar to this, which are already in various stages of construction. Have you had anyone contact you, apart from developers, saying that what Towcester needs is more tin sheds in the approaches to the town? Has anyone told you that we need yet more commuting, yet more lorries, and yet more pollution? Large acreages of our once rural landscape are disappearing under tarmac and concrete to be replaced with a visual blight of stark, monolithic, characterless warehouses, and yet more featureless retail outlets. How can this be justified in the present climate? And I use the word climate advisedly. My second grounds that I want to mention now are the safe crossing for a footbridge over the A43 at the end of Tiffield Lane. The developers and your advisors are reluctant to require this, despite it making the trip from the centre of the development to Towcester Town Centre some 600 metres shorter, not 150 metres as stated by your advisor. This bridge would provide a safe, sustainable route for workers to access the site on foot or by bicycle to and from Towcester, and provide a great opportunity to enhance the green infrastructure network. We urge you to please look again at this and make it a condition of approval. Thirdly, this development depends on the construction of yet another roundabout on the A43 at the Hulkett turn. As mentioned, this is yet to be approved by the Highways of England, and we fear that this roundabout, if approved, will cause increased traffic through Tiffield, particularly so at particularly so at peak hours and when there are problems on the M1. Drivers will quickly learn that they can rat run through Tiffield to avoid the congestion at this roundabout. They could also rat run to and from this roundabout from the A5 through Calderket and Tiffield, and as evidenced by your own environmental protection officer, the new roundabout will also draw traffic away from the Southern Relief Road, negating its benefits to Towston. Delivery vans and workers at the development will also learn to use these rat runs. Lastly, more traffic will use the Old Northampton Road, further increasing the congestion and already dangerous pollution levels at the Saracen's Head junction in Towston. Finally, Tiffield Parish Council and the residents of Tiffield continue to feel as though they have been presented with a fait accompli. We have the impression that no matter what we say or how we object, the development will proceed. We hope that you will reconsider this application and prove this wrong. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Pritchard, if you could just mute your microphone, because we're having some sort of extra sound in the background there, but I think we heard clearly enough what you had to say, Mr. Beasley. I'm most grateful to you for coming on. But before you go, anybody would like to, from the members, I'd like to ask Mr. Beasley a question. Councillor Hollowell, please.
Hello? Yeah.
Yeah, Councillor Hollowell, yeah, go on.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Beasley. It was a bad line, so I may have missed this, but I wondered, what was the parish council's position when this site was first put forward 2 or 3 years ago for the local plan?
We objected at the time.
And what was the main area of concern then?
Again, it was to do, I believe, with the need for the site and possible traffic implications for Towston, for Tiffield.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Mr. Beasley.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hollowell. Anyone else like to ask a question of the Chairman of Tiffield Parish Council? I look around my screens. I think, Mr. Beasley, they don't want to ask you anything more. But however, thank you for your contribution. If you could mute your microphone now, stay with us though. We go to our next speaker, and that is Mr. Peter Howard, who is a local resident. Mr. Howard, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I hope you can hear me.
I can, yes. You have 3 minutes starting from now.
Starting now. Yes, I live on the Northampton Road. I'm a member of Towston Neighbourhood Watch, and I'm speaking up for residents of Towston in the Shires in particular. Not all residents are necessarily opposed to the development, but the one thing that most are really concerned about is the impact on increased traffic, particularly using the Northampton Road, which is already a known speeding hotspot. We think the applicant has substantially underestimated the additional traffic which will be encouraged to use the Northampton Road once the new roundabout is built, realising, of course, that it's a much safer option than the current Holcott turn. So the first point really is about safety, and Andrew's already quite nicely presented for us the proposed traffic calming measures. So my first point was simply to ensure that the committee agreed that we must include those in full as a condition of approval to the new roundabout, the 2 new build outs, a new vehicle activated sign, which Andrew didn't mention, and the new Puffing crossing. And I agree the north location of the Puffing crossing is best, and I think we should include a condition for that footpath to be built. And I think that will, across the bottom end of the long stay car park, and I think that will provide the most ideal solution, which everyone will be able to make use of that crossing in that instance. The second point, Mr. Chairman, I agree with you. I don't think there's been sufficient work done yet on the highways implications of this. And before approving it, I think we do need to give careful consideration to the extent to which the benefits of the Relief Road will be compromised as an unintended consequence, which I think John mentioned. So if we're right and the route through the town centre and the Northampton Road becomes an attractive option to connect the A5 with the A43, it will become very difficult then to motivate drivers to use the Relief Road instead, including HGVs. And that will be bad news for air quality and congestion in the town centre. So Highways England have got a holding objection out, which you mentioned, and they have agreed within their review to look at the traffic routing and safety implications. For example, reducing speed limits on the A43 as you approach the new roundabout, which we think will be vital. We've specifically asked them to include within that review an assessment of how traffic can be guided to stay on the A43 and the A5 and not use the Northampton Road as a rat run. And I see in the bond proposals that's now in the updated written report, looking at things like local traffic only or no through traffic signage at either end of the Northampton Road and applying amenity weight limits. And I think we do have to bring back onto the table the discussion about de-trunking the A5 into the town centre, which will help to route heavy traffic in particular away to use the relief road. So I'm proposing to the committee that you make further representations to the Highways England to support this request, to look closely again at how they're going to manage their signage and weight limits as appropriate, to give assurances how that traffic might be managed appropriately within their final response back to this committee before the final decision is taken. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any member like to ask a question of Mr. Howard? No, I can't see anybody is leaping so to do. So, Mr. Howard, thank you very much.
Everyone agrees with me. That's great.
Well, that you may make all you can certainly assume is that nobody wants to ask you a question at this point. So, if you'd like to switch your microphone off, you go on looking at what's going on. Obviously, thank you very much. Well, we'll move on now, if we may, to the next speaker, who is the applicant, and David Smith from IM Properties. Good afternoon to you, Mr. Smith.
Good afternoon, Councillor.
Right, you have 3 minutes, like the others, to state your case.
Thank you. Chair, members, thank you for the opportunity to address you this afternoon and take questions with our planning and highways advisors. The application before you is the culmination of considerable work over a number of years as we strive to deliver the best and most sustainable scheme that we can. Throughout this period, we've engaged proactively and transparently with members and other stakeholders to set out our proposal for translating policy and realising an important economic asset for the town. Economies across the country face huge uncertainties, and surely now is the time to embrace opportunity and ensure that Towcester and South Northants is as resilient as it can be in a post-COVID world. Importantly, the application responds to a recently adopted policy in the local plan and has huge potential to support existing and new businesses across industrial and logistics sectors and at a variety of scales, providing opportunity on the doorstep of a growing settlement. For much of the last few years, we've been engaged in extensive dialogue with Highways England and the County Council to ensure an acceptable highway solution can be found, both addressing the acute need for safety improvements to the Holcott Junction, but also satisfactorily accommodating the traffic that will be generated by the development itself. The extent of engagement, in my view, has, and in our opinion, has been exhaustive and has resulted in substantive agreement with both the highway authorities. Only points of detail remain to be resolved. In these unprecedented times, we all have had to do things differently. And to this end, our consultation went digital, which I know was a frustration to some. But let me be clear, throughout the whole process, we've been ready and prepared to engage unequivocally with all interested and affected parties, in person or latterly by other means. Our engagement has been extensive. Inevitably, there are differences of opinion. No development is impact-free, but the technical evidence and the consultee responses give you the confidence that any impacts will be acceptable and that the benefits to Towcester and South Northants as a whole outweigh those impacts. Where there are issues to be resolved, we are committed to resolving those. Moreover, should committee be minded to follow your officer's recommendation, we are equally committed to an ongoing dialogue with all relevant stakeholders to respond to concerns and explore beneficial outcomes. This is all part and parcel of our investment in Towcester. The report before you is extensive and fair, and this is by no means the end of the process. And we look forward to progressing the detail in line with our desire to deliver a setting in which business and employees can flourish and exhibits best-in-class energy and environmental credentials. We truly hope that members will see fit to support the recommendation and enable us to realise the ambition of the policy to deliver new employment opportunities at a critical time and much needed improvements to road safety on the A43. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Smith. I know that alongside you, you have Simon Tucker and Damien Hulstock, fellow consultants, so they can answer a specific question, which you may not be able to give such an expert answer to. But before I ask members to put forward their questions, I've got a couple I would like to throw forward to you. Now, many critics of this scheme consider it too large and in the wrong place, thus fundamentally changing the nature of the environment of Towcester and obviously the villages of Towcester, of Tiffield and Caldicot. How do you respond to this feeling that this is just the wrong place?
Well, on a number of fronts, Councillor and Chair. First and foremost, Towcester sits obviously alongside a key strategic and arterial route, which makes it an exceptionally attractive location for industrial and logistics uses. We can't escape from that fact. Secondly, the site sits adjoining an existing settlement, so it makes it a sustainable location to try to capture employment other than by means of private car, whether that's public transport on a sensible journey or whether that's on foot or by cycle. So I think it hits both of those boxes squarely, and hopefully that gives you an answer to your question.
Well, what about the other points about its proximity to the villages of Tiffield and Caldicot? They're in the countryside. That's a hardly urban environment.
But, well, I think the assessment work that's been undertaken demonstrates clearly that those impacts will be limited, if not negligible. Certainly in terms of the landscape and a visual impact assessment from key public vantage points. So I wouldn't agree that the impact is as people perceive it to be on the villages to the north of the site.
And on one other question, you talk about points of detail, to use your words, to still be resolved as far as transport issues are concerned. These points are pretty fundamental, some locals people may say, such as the consequence of the M1 being closed and a lot of traffic then coming down the A43, exacerbated by what will surely be a huge amount of traffic generated from your own business park, if this is agreed. And also leading then to traffic jams down the Northampton Road, together with rat runs through Tiffield and Caldicot, a whole host of things. You haven't resolved these highways issues, have you? And points of detail is perhaps a euphemism for a lot of work to do.
I think there's a lot of work to do on the detail of the scheme itself, Councillor, as we move into the detailed design, the layout, the siting, a number of the items that Andrew has spoken about that will be discussed in detail through the Reserve Matters process. And yes, there's an outstanding Highways England objection around points of detail of effectively highway geometry. None of the strategic issues around the approach that's been taken to assessing the traffic impact, the modelling software used and the methodology and the findings are all accepted without question by Highways England and by the County Council and by your own independent expert that's given it the extra level of scrutiny that the Council wanted to see. It may be that Simon Tucker can respond and give you further reassurance on each of those if you would like him to do so. Yes, let's have Mr. Tucker's view. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, and go ahead.
Yeah, so just to say that as David described it, the process that we've been through in the transport assessment that was submitted looked at the impacts of the development at a strategic level across Northamptonshire and then at a local level in Towcester itself with two specific model runs that were prepared in full consultation with the County Council and with Highways England. Those were agreed, are agreed. The findings of them and the implications of it are agreed. And as David Smith said, Mr. Clark has confirmed his view that those are agreed. So the outstanding matters that arise are points of detail. The issues relating to rat running, as you described it, or traffic flows on Northampton Road are well understood from the assessments that we've put forward, and they have defined the mitigation strategies that we've put forward. So just to be clear, and they're set out in the committee report, but the outstanding matter with Highways England isn't a matter of principle. It's a matter of the alignment of some of the curbs on the exit from the roundabout. So how lorries will actually drive off the roundabout, having been through it. And we've responded to that. And it is a detailed design matter. The other point is the interaction between the roundabout and the lay-by just to the north of the roundabout, if you can picture that. Both of those points require dealing with. They'll require dealing with through the detailed design of the scheme, but they don't fundamentally change either the scale or the size of it, or indeed the improvements that the roundabout brings in terms of safety improvements to that junction. So they are points of detail rather than points of principle. Just on the roundabout, you mentioned the point about queuing traffic. That has been fully assessed and considered by Highways England. They specifically asked us to look at the benefit of the scheme in terms of the safety improvements, removing the crossroads, with the potential disbenefit of vehicles needing to slow down and go through that roundabout. And that is all presented in the transport assessment as a coherent review of the overall impacts of the scheme, and ultimately from a safety perspective come out very positive. So there aren't any significant outstanding points. They are matters of detailed design, effectively, Chair.
All right, well, we'll leave it on that. Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Let's go to other questions from members. Councillor Johns.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got two linked questions really to Mr. Smith. So good afternoon, Mr. Smith. As you'll have picked up through your public consultations, a lot of local concerns really amount to the scale and bulk of what the proposed development. So how critical is your application in terms of storage and distribution? And the link question to it is, it's been made mention of the possibility of creating 1,500 jobs. So could you give us a breakdown on the type of job that you're proposing to create? So that's the questions for Mr. Smith and for Mr. Tucker.
Shall we take those answers first,
okay.
John? So, David Smith.
Yes, sure. So scale and bulk. I guess it's somewhat inevitable that industrial and logistics developments have a need as part of their function for scale and bulk. So we can't escape that. I think what I would say is, if you go back to the assessment work, we have to keep going back to the assessment work. The landscape and visual impact assessment work clearly, in our view, demonstrates that the impacts of that scale and bulk from any number of given locations, with the exception of perhaps the A43, which is a key arterial route, as I've previously explained, and a fleeting vehicular view, if you like, there are very few impacts, limited impacts in terms of scale and bulk. So I fear that the perception doesn't necessarily or won't necessarily match the reality of the assessment work that's been undertaken to this point and accepted by the council's advisors, with the exception of some discussions on the species and a range of other things that Andrew's touched on in points of detail. So I mean, to the second question, how important is the logistics component? It's very important to us, because that is driving part of the need. This is a very attractive site to that market. But let's not forget that 30% of the site is being given over to industrial uses, and they may have exactly the same building size and bulk as a logistics operator, but a very different nature of operation. And then on the other side of Titfield Lane, we have a much lower, smaller fine grain, if you like, provision of smaller units, which will meet a different market again. So we are not covering the entirety of the site with the largest, the biggest buildings that we could deliver. There's a blend, there's a mix in terms of the scale, the bulk, and the uses proposed. In terms of the jobs, I know that the authority's own economic team have concurred with the assessment work that's been done in terms of the socio-economic benefits and impacts of the development. And really, Andrew's broken down the key figure in terms of the benefits for Towcester, obviously in the order of 500 jobs. And those jobs will be met by people either looking for different work, people who are looking for work in the first place, or obviously the growth in Towcester that will emerge with the SUE to the south as well. In terms of the mix, it's quite difficult to right now specify exactly what that mix will be. Obviously, we've got some industrial within the scheme. what type of industrial remains to be seen, but that could bring a very diverse mix of occupations and opportunities. Logistics itself is delivering a hugely diverse range of employment opportunities, as we know from looking at the pandemic and how we've had to respond in that sector. White collar, blue collar, huge opportunities and opportunities for growth right the way through organisations that might take occupation at the site. So difficult to say, but what I can say with some conviction is that there will be a very diverse range of opportunities in this development.
So, sorry, Chairman, just for clarification, Mr. Long, when I read in the report, I've read somewhere there was 500 jobs. Mr. Longbottom actually said 1,500. So is it 500 jobs?
At the Towster level. So the assessment is in the order of 1,500 jobs in total. So that's the gross jobs in total. But we're saying at a Towster level.
Full-time equivalent.
So the
full-time equivalent in Towster.
Yes, five. Yeah, in the order of 500 in Towster. Yeah.
So where's the 1,500 come from?
That's at all levels. So that's the total number of jobs that we generated by the development, including opportunities outside Towster.
Okay. So 500 is the figure we should go on then, is it?
Well, there are opportunities for the whole of your constituency and the district. So
I'm sorry to be pedantic, but I think it is important. So of those 500, how many would be linked to storage and distribution?
That's not a question I can easily answer at this time.
Thank you. So the question for Mr. Tucker on transport.
Go ahead.
I have to think what the question is now. Yes, I mean, in the report you've prepared, you talk about the impact on the air quality monitoring zone in the centre of Towster. Am I correct?
Well, we prepared the traffic inputs to those assessments, if you like. Yeah.
And you assessed it to be moderate.
That's correct. Yeah. If
that means moderately adverse.
Sorry, is this a question about the traffic flows or
the traffic flow will lead to adverse air quality.
No, so it might be better if Mr. Holstock deals with the actual air quality conclusions rather than me, because I produced the traffic flows to go into it. But the conclusion, I don't know if he's on the line. I can't see.
He should be there, I think.
Yeah, thank you.
Chairman, if I could just clarify, there are two factors of concern. One is the volume of additional traffic. You might want to break that down into vehicles, HGVs, but obviously that culminates into a problem with air quality at the pinch point around the Saracen's Head crossroad, which is already subject to an air quality monitoring order. And your report does confirm that it would have an adverse impact on air quality. Am I correct?
So I can answer that if that's okay. So yes, it's correct. We have prepared a detailed air quality assessment, and it's important to say at this point that it does assume a reasonable worst case. This is because it uses both future years emissions data and 2017 emissions data. So it applies a cautious approach, and that's quite an important point to make. It does identify some moderate increases in NO2 levels in the town centre. However, even when using the 2017 emissions data, all of those levels and impacts remain below the UK objective levels, which is the sort of the important test, and obviously it's important not to try and keep levels below those objective levels. So there are some moderate increases in the town centre, really only in a number of areas, a small number of areas, I should say.
Can I ask then, with your knowledge of transport and air quality, if there is an air quality management scheme in place, isn't the objective to reduce air quality, improve air quality? and not bring forward any scheme that would adversely affect it?
Well, I think, as I say, the important point is keeping the air quality levels below the objective levels, and there are some improvements in certain areas, including north of the A5, as a result of the development as well. I should also point out there are no significant effects on particulate concentrations, which is the other thing which is measured in terms of air quality as well. And overall, I think has covered quite comprehensively in the officer's report, is this point that actually, future year emissions are improving, and that is something which will continue to have a beneficial effect as we move forward, and this site will come forward over a number of years.
Just picking up on that point, you're talking about air quality through Towcester. Would it be a consideration of the applicant to delay any development until the relief road is complete? Then at least some of the traffic that currently goes through Towcester, perhaps not much, but some will then go on the relief road, including your heavy goods vehicles.
I don't. Sorry, I can take that. That's not something that we would want to commit to, because it would be completely out of our hands, Chair. And we know that the market is there, the demand is there, and we want to get on and deliver the economic opportunities. And we think it would be, I think it would be the wrong thing to do to couple the link road with this development, personally.
All right, let's go to Councillor Pritchard. You've got a question.
Thank you, Chair. You've actually just stolen one of my questions. So,
well, you can rephrase it if you like.
No, it was with regards to the link road, and I think I've got the answer to that. With regards to the Northampton Road, was any consideration given with regards to limiting the size of vehicles going down the Northampton Road towards the Saracen traffic lights?
I'll take that one if that's okay, Chair. Yeah, I mean, the modelling, it is actually linked to the previous question. The modelling that we undertook, and just to pick up a point that was raised earlier, actually, we actually assessed a situation whereby the roundabout was created, but without the development traffic, so that we could see what the implication of putting a roundabout at the end of Northampton Road would have on movements through Towcester with the bypass in place. And that was specifically, or relief road in place, and that was specifically asked of us by the County Council to actually check whether or not that roundabout would have a significant adverse effect on the relief road and the function of it. And that's reported in the transport assessment, and shows that there isn't a significant impact on the use of the bypass, if you like, or traffic through Towcester as a result of building the roundabout. There is an increase in flows on Northampton Road, both from building the roundabout because it becomes a safer, easier junction to use at the end of Northampton Road, and as a result of the development. But in terms of HGV movements, those aren't significant. So, and we've had this discussion with local residents and the authorities. The modelling isn't showing any significant change in HGV usage along the Northampton Road on that link, and therefore it isn't deemed necessary to introduce any measures to control them, because the modelling showing cars will use that route, but that lorries won't use that route in preference to the existing routes that they use.
But when you look at the access at the Holcott turn, at the moment you can't get heavy goods vehicles turning left down there. But when you actually put a roundabout there, it will be very much easier for heavy goods lorries to go down the Northampton Road. And then, of course, there's a major problem of actually at the traffic lights, as obviously turning left down the high street.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing to stop HGVs that want to go from the A43 north to the A5 south, i.e. through Towcester, using Northampton Road at the moment. There are some advisory signs at the bottom end in Towcester for HGVs, but that situation doesn't change as a result of the roundabout. It makes it safer to get out of that junction. But as I said, what the modelling shows is that whilst there's a diversion of cars making that movement, there isn't that significant change on HGVs, and that's partly because although there are a lot of HGVs on the A43, as you'll know, the proportion of those that are actually trying to get from the M1 north, if you like, so down the A43 and then through Towcester, is actually relatively small.
I think just a last comment with regards to that on page 74, I find it quite astounding that the closure of the M1 should not form part of the transport modelling. I think if you live locally to Towcester, you'll appreciate that it happens on a very frequent basis, that the M1 is closed and lots of traffic is diverted. And when you consider the amount of traffic that this particular development will generate, it will only add to it to cause even more problems.
Yeah, I think, well, again, just to sort of, without going back too far, the modelling that we prepared at a strategic level was based on locally around Towcester, 30 plus traffic surveys, all of which ran for 2 weeks. So the input into all of that modelling didn't just pick one day when everything was fine on the network. It did spread over a significant period of time, and therefore we'll have picked up periods when traffic flow was heavier or lighter within Towcester as a result of those changes. So it doesn't specifically address a closure on the M1, for example, but what it does, we think, and as County Council and Highways England have agreed with the modelling anyway, with the work, is that it does accept that Towcester and the area around it, the A5, the A43, has a lot of traffic on it. It does suffer from queuing and in some cases congestion in the peak hours. And the test from a planning perspective, in terms of this application, is whether or not that gets materially worse with or without the development. And it was accepted that if the M1's closed and everyone's trying to get through Towcester, that might be a different situation, but that doesn't change the test on the planning application as to whether or not the scheme is acceptable in normal conditions, which is what the policy requires of us. So the shorter answer to the question is, we haven't specifically assessed that situation. We have assessed reasonable, normal, if you like, busy occurrences and times in and around Towcester, and we have mitigated where that's highlighted a problem.
Just for clarification, I assume you've done these assessments before the COVID crisis, when since then there hasn't been a lot of traffic anyway at times.
Yeah, so the Northamptonshire model that we use as the basis has been around for a number of years, and then we had to update it over 2017, 2018 with more data that went into it. So all of the work is pre-COVID, yes.
Thank you very much. I noticed Mr. Howard's got his hand up. I'm sorry, Mr. Howard, as you're not a member of the committee, you can't actually ask a question. Let's hope that one of our members might ask something that you wanted asked. All right, let's see if anybody else, any other colleagues. Councillor Townsend, I see your hand next, please.
You've identified that there's a large demand for sheds in this, who put it this way, in this part of the world, and we're only too well aware of that fact, which is why I think we are we treat these applications really quite seriously, because we feel that we should not be taking as many as we sometimes seem to have. But my question really is that this is an outline application, and I'm particularly concerned that if we do accept the application, that in outline and everything is promised to be absolutely wonderful, our experience is that once you get individuals involved, individual companies come forward, and then oh yes, but we must not have the 24 meters or 21 meters, I think it was higher. We need 24, and that's going to be this, that, and the other. So we get pressurized to change that. I would like to know that you will stand up either for both for height and for the design, the colour, the landscaping, which quite rightly our officers, I hope, and I hope we have really fired them up to ask that these things are put in the right sort of setting. are you happy to accept that we are going to be really tough on making certain that if we have these sheds, that they do look and integrate themselves as far as we can possibly make them into the setting of Towcester?
The short answer is yes. We've worked quite hard with Andrew to this point, and there's more work to be done on sort of design parameters, if you like. Andrew alluded to discussions around elevational treatment, which are ongoing, and there are conditions that look to deal with that going forwards. We have a design guide which is setting out the principles against which subsequent reserve matters applications will be considered, and we have the parameters plan which sets out very clearly the building heights across the site, from the lower buildings on the western portion to the higher buildings on the eastern portion of the site. So the answer is yes. What I would say is if a user that you're particularly keen to attract to Towcester, or takes an interest in Towcester, wanted something that is marginally pushing in one part of the site that envelope, then that would have to be considered on its merits, and you would have to weigh up the value of that particular occupier, the jobs, the visual impact at that moment in time, to reach a decision on a different occasion. But the answer is yes. You know, we will be sticking to what's within any permission that we get.
I would say that you know, mark my words, if it comes back again, I mean, I shan't be here probably, but I hope that we will say, look, these are the parameters that we have allowed you, and we'd hope that you would take that through to your developers, that to your companies, that this is the maximum we can have, and this is what we want, and that we can't have the wrong colour just because that's your house colour. That's one of the things we've had, I remember. You know, because these things are important to the setting of the site. And actually, the other question I was going to ask is: have you considered that this application is for one part of? There's yet another industrial site next door. Is there any thought of designing the thing so that it's integrated into as far as possible? Otherwise, it's not just out on its own, and then the next one comes along and it's completely different.
Yes, insofar as we are very conscious that the council's policy is to seek to deliver a new home for Towcester Town Football Club in the fullness of time, and that's a conversation we've had on and off with the football club about how can we facilitate their ambition and the policy to make that happen. So on our western portion, we're safeguarding a route, which was an explicit request of officers, and we were happy to support that, safeguarding a route to provide a connection into the eastern side of Bell Plantation and potentially Towcester Town Football Club, should they be successful in negotiating some of that land to come forward, and that was important to them to make sure they had options to be able to try and bring forward the recreational facility as quickly as they possibly could, recognizing the acute need that they have. So yes, in that respect. And we also know that Andrew and his team, I believe, are having conversations, we'll have a conversation about the pedestrian connectivity in the fullness of time as well, to make sure that these two things talk to each other, and we're facilitating that to happen as well. So there is a degree of those two sites talking to each other.
I like the phrase talking to each other. More of that, we hope. Let's go to another question. Councillor Hollowell.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of questions, probably for Mr. Smith. They're only peripheral matters, but they're covered in the report. They crop up in the report, so I'm curious. The first one's a procedural thing. You've carried out a lot of work, a lot of preparation work for this project. You've submitted the planning application. You've still got some things to complete. You knew at the outset that you were going to need some path orders to deal with the rights of ways. So what I'm wondering is, why, when you submitted the planning application, did you not submit an application for the path orders?
In typical fashion, the way we deal with it is we look to secure the planning permission first and make sure that you've got the the confidence that you have approval for what you want to do before you then pursue time, effort and resource into the actual stopping up or diversion of those routes. So it's a sequential thing. You deal with the principle first, and once you have that, you can then work out, or you can then follow the process through to its natural conclusion. But that's not to say that we haven't considered the implications of what we're doing here in terms of the impacts on rights of way and the network. That very much has been central to our thinking, to try to make sure that we connect in, we allow the journeys that people want to make still to be made, and ideally in a safer in a safer way.
I mean, I don't dispute that, but it doesn't take long to put an application form together. Why I'm asking, why I'm curious, is it will take you a long time to get the planning sorted, and then suddenly you can't start because you've got public rights of way in your way, and that can be another time scale, and you're kicking around with men waiting to work. And the worst scenario is you start work on the public right of way. Not only you committing an offence, but it then prevents us to make a 257. So
we weren't. Sorry, Councillor.
Provision was made. I mean, provision was made in 2013 to allow a smoother process here, and it does rely on the two applications coming in together.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I suppose the thing is, we know we've got a lot more work to be done. A lot more work to be done on the technical side. So we have our 278 agreements to progress. We obviously have planning conditions. We have other things to deal with Andrew. So I think our view is that the stopping up process can run parallel with some of that work, and therefore shouldn't unduly delay a start on site when we get to that point.
Okay, the other question that you might be able to just help with, there is this idea has been mooted of a community fund. Now, it's not a material planning consideration, we know that, but I just wondered how committed you really are to this community fund, and are you committed enough to enter into a unilateral declaration quite separate to the main 106 agreement?
The answer to that is we're very committed to it. There are two precedents for it that we're working on at the moment. A project in northwest Leicestershire, where we have a community fund that's been running for about 9 months now, and has given away 90,000, I think it's like 80 or 90,000 pounds worth of grants, which have come in particularly beneficial at the current time, as you can imagine. With more to run on that during the life of the project. We've also launched 2 years ago, similarly, a fund with Pedamore, North Birmingham. So there are both two live projects in play, being administered by two independent organisations on our behalf, who make sure that the money that we give is being distributed fairly and in accordance with agreed criteria, which they will lead on, but the community can be involved in as well. So absolutely committed to that. Whether it's appropriate or necessary for it to be dealt with under another mechanism, I don't believe it is. It isn't in both of those other instances, and of course it doesn't feature as a prerequisite or requirement of the planning. We can't do that, but we are absolutely committed to doing it.
So those are the two projects. How are they administered? I mean, it's something like a landfill operation. I mean, how do you actually?
So we have a with Pedamore, the North Birmingham project, and we have a Heart of England Community Foundation. So it's an independent external organisation that is well versed in both raising money, finding money, and then distributing money at all sorts of levels. And in Northwest Leicester, it's the Leicestershire and Rutland Community Foundation. There's a whole network of similar foundations across the country.
You have a formal arrangement with those bodies, do you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Breeze. You're next.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. You said in your 3-minute talk that you would be offering top of the class, I think was the phrase, top of the class energy credentials and top of the class environmental credentials. So can you tell us how they're going to be any better than whatever the standard regulations are for those particular aspects? And where are these top of the class energy and environmental protections going to be enshrined?
Yeah.
And I'm also just going to draw your attention to page 71 of the report, where the SNC landscape consultant says that your proposals do not provide sufficient information. And that's again repeated on page 75 on your sustainability report.
Sorry, if I could take the second one question first.
Yeah.
Sorry, if I can take the second question first. I think that was a land. I don't have the paragraph straight in front of me, but the landscape question around further information. There is, as we go through the process and we have the discussion with Andrew and team on reserve matters, I think the landscape consultants accepted that we will be able to deal with all of the residual issues through that process as we get into the detail of plots, plot development, detailed landscaping in a couple of key areas of the scheme. So I think that will be dealt with in the fullness of time, if I understand your question correctly. But going to the first point, I mean, we are as a business are hugely passionate about leading the way and delivering the most sustainable schemes that we can. And we do have track record in doing that. We've referred on a number of occasions, either through the consultations, through discussions with members of the public around some of our initiatives, for example, the electricity cost neutral project that we have at the hub in North Birmingham, where we're using a combination of photovoltaics and battery technology to really harness the potential of renewable technologies. And that was a building subsequently taken by Argos. So we're really passionate about that, and we do want to be delivering a best-in-class solution. And we are proposing that here in Towcester. At the end of the day, we're looking to achieve a 30% carbon reduction, and that's beyond the current building regulations. So it meets the intent of the policy and goes well beyond policy in our view. And that will be through a combination of the fabric specification, energy measures, and low carbon use. The report touches on two areas: PVs and battery storage. PVs will be deployed in this scheme, and they form part of the solution to achieving the 30% carbon reduction. How much PV is built into the scheme will partly depend on the occupier, the individual occupiers, their requirements, how much energy they need, and how much they can use, because there is no point harnessing a lot of the energy if you can't then use it sensibly, and you can't deport it back to the grid at the right rate or time. So what Andrew is aware of and officers are aware of is there's a detailed conversation to follow. Once we've got this framework in place of what we need to achieve, there's a detailed conversation to follow about how do we actually achieve it. And that will be partly informed by discussions with occupiers. But we really are keen here to deliver the best that we can. We said in the public consultation that we are seriously looking at how we get to carbon net zero ready, which is obviously a phrase you may have heard in the press and certainly in the real estate world more recently. And we're looking at that. How can we achieve that? How can we get to that? And we will if we can, but it does need a lot more detailed work and input from occupiers.
Yeah, just forgive me for saying this, but most of our applicants are passionate about their projects and their environmental landscape credentials, but so often we find that it falls at the viability stage. So having persuaded us of how a wonderful scheme is, that when it comes to detailed consent, viability issues get in the way, whether the technology is too expensive or actually, I'm sorry, planning committee, but actually we only need to meet this whatever standard of regulation to achieve our ends. So I think that that's something that we're quite used to hearing, but it would be something that we really do want to see delivered. And whether this will come before the new West Northamptonshire committee in whatever form that takes. And I'm sure that we will be revisiting that to make sure that these promises are seen through. But at the moment, our report says on page 71 that your landscape, the landscape consultant, concludes that the scheme does not fully meet the tests of the relevant policies relating to landscaping, and that's at 7.42 on page 71 of our report. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, food for thought there, I sense. Any other questions that members might have, this opportunity to put direct to the gentleman from IM Properties? I can't see anybody else. So just a final one from me then. There are many people watching this broadcast on YouTube this afternoon who will be violently opposed to this whole application. Mr. Smith, what is your message to those people on the assumption, and we don't know yet whether if this application is approved? What do you say to them?
Sorry, I got the violently opposed, and then
yeah. I mean, there are many people watching this broadcast this afternoon who are very opposed to this application. What is your message to these people in the event that this application is approved?
We can't reassure everybody, but I would like to try to reassure them that, you know, we are committed to delivering the best scheme that we can. That's the best scheme in design, the best scheme in landscaping, the best scheme in its energy and environmental credentials. And we've done everything thus far to ensure that the scheme accommodates as well as it can do. And I think it is very successfully achieving that within the site that the council have identified for employment development. So we are realising a policy that the council ultimately pursued and adopted very recently in 2019. But we're not going to disappear. We've never disappeared. We've never shied away from a conversation with anybody. I've made it a prerequisite of our team to be accessible in whatever shape or form that we can be. And we will have the hard conversations, and where we can do something, as I think we have demonstrated through the process of this application. We approached the shires we engaged positively with the shires and some of their representatives when they wanted to talk to us. We wanted to hear what they had to say, and we've looked for solutions, and we found some solutions which ultimately the county council are supportive of. We're proposing a mechanism by which we can go back and try to resolve the smaller issues if they materialise, if driver behaviour isn't as the modelling anticipates, which we accept. You know, may not be perfect, but it's the best available technology and assessment that we can do at this time. So we're here. We will continue to talk. There's a long way to go in the detail of the scheme, in the construction as well, where people will be concerned. What will the impact be during construction? The business is committed to an open and transparent conversation. We may not always agree on everything, but we're not going anywhere.
Well, thank you very much, David Smith. I think in the absence of any other questions, we'll say thank you. If you switch your microphone off, you're welcome to observe what we continue to discuss, because obviously we now go into the stage of discussing it in more detail and as to where we go on this. We have the recommendation that is before us to basically give a permission subject to the various matters being submitted and considered acceptable. So who perhaps somebody who hasn't actually spoken so far in the discussions would like to kick us off here? I'm looking around my screens, and if there isn't, is there anybody else? Well, in that case, I will, yes, Councillor Hollowell. Okay, right, you go first then.
Oh, thanks. Thank you, Chairman. I'll be as brief as I can, but there are a number of points I wanted to make. The first one concerns the principle of development. We've included this in the local plan part 2. It underwent considerable inspection, not least by the planning inspectorate. And so it is now part of the development plan. And so as a principle, any application, this one or any other, meets that basic criteria. So I don't have a problem with the principle of the development. There are some specific points that I would like to mention. First of all, the charging points for electric vehicles. What is on offer in the report is perfectly in line with their current policies. and particularly with INF4, which is in the local plan part 2. However, the world has moved on even since last June, and the number of charging points that are being talked about, and I think as well they're only being talked about for cars, not for commercial vehicles, it is really now way behind where this country is heading in terms of green energy. And the Prime Minister has committed himself to bringing forward the move towards electrically powered vehicles. So I think that officers probably ought to have a conversation, if committee are minded to approve this. I think officers should have a conversation with the applicant about electrical charging points, because I think what is being proposed within 5 years will not be anywhere near adequate. The next point concerns landscaping, and it's merely really to reiterate what I've said many times before regarding trees. And I've looked at the landscaping proposals, and I thought they were largely satisfactory. What I want to say, what I keep reiterating, is we are not in the business of planting forests. We're in the business of planning, and we want trees primarily to screen the development. So we don't want trees that lose their leaves in the winter. We want proper, effective screening. And now, secondary, we have to think about carbon capture and the types of trees that are most efficient for that. So that's all I need to say on that. On the question of the rights of way changes, it doesn't matter really. I don't mind whether they're diversions or extinguishments or whatever. But if we've been asked to make these path orders under section 257, this is a planning function. 257s do go wrong, and they can become very time consuming and very expensive. And I'm concerned that the public purse is not plundered in order to fund these or any other changes. Within the order to make the path order, the path order itself, we can include a clause whereby the applicant meets all of our costs in making the order and possibly defending it, because with a path order, anybody can object to it. It's not like a planning application where anybody can object, and they can get listened to, and then we do something completely different if that's what we choose to do. With a path order, if somebody objects and they don't withdraw the objection, we can't finish the process. It has to go to the planning inspectorate. And if it was the county council who objected to this, and they have said they're threatened that they might do, then it would have to go to a public inquiry. And then decisions have to be made about, well, are we going to have a barrister? Are we going to have a QC? Well, who's going to pay for it? So I feel that as well as the clause in the path order, and having given this a lot of thought, I think we also need to deal with this in the main section 106 agreement, so that if, with or without an objection, we decide with the applicant who is going to pay for it, and it'll be them, but how much do they want us to spend on their behalf? So this is a complicated legal area, but it needs to be sorted out in the 106. And finally, just on the question of the amelioration measures, certainly the weight restrictions and the things of that nature, which are listed in the table on page 15 of the update, they're the things that, to my mind, should be given priority to try to assist local communities as much as we can. And beyond that, I think that the application is in accord with the development plan, and so should therefore be allowed. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Let us move on to Councillor Johns.
Excuse me, Chairman.
Yes,
could I just make a point, please? It's on the public view, it does look like we have got extra councillors in the meeting. Do you think we could ask the speakers to depart from the meeting and watch it on the video link rather than actually being in the meeting?
Yes, I'm grateful for that observation. Yeah, I can see Mr. Howard, you're still there. Could you say goodbye to us and cut off and bye-bye? And
Mr. Beasley as well.
And Mr. Beasley as well. Yes, do you mind?
Well, in fact, all of the speakers, if we could.
All of the speakers, yes. If they could just leave the meeting. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for your participation, everyone. But it is just the committee now. Thank you, Leslie, for pointing that out for us. All right, Councillor Johns, I was calling you.
Yes, thanks, Chairman. Yes, I would certainly agree with Councillor Hollowell in that, that this site is in the local plan, and I've no objections at all to development of some sort taking place. However, having read the report very carefully, there are significant areas of concern in there that make me think that it's certainly premature at this stage. I will come to one or two minor points first. They don't have a bearing overall, but I think it's important to mention them. The report, which again, I thank Mr. Longbottom for his very comprehensive report. I think he covers all the points exceptionally well. But there is mention in there about public transport and the number 88 bus, with the county council saying they'd welcome the chance for a bus to go up Northampton Road. Well, local people wouldn't, because people use it in part to go to supermarkets that are not in this location. So that's a bit of a red herring. And I don't know how that got in there. It's also a service that is under constant threat and is only running now because parish councils, including Towcester Town Council, support it. Now, my main concern, really, Chairman, is the overemphasis on warehousing, on storage and distribution on this site. I mean, it seems to be largely down to warehousing, a very large shed because it's near the A43. Now, we have had a lot of dialogue with the applicant, and they have been very open to discussions. However, some of the key points that have been raised, I know through those discussions, they haven't addressed. And the main one being the impact on Northampton Road, and as a consequence, the A5, in terms of both additional traffic movements and the knock-on effect in terms of air quality. So if I look at that first, and I will, if I may, with your permission, Chairman, just read the section in the officer's report that was detailed by our own environmental protection team. And it says, the air quality and transport assessment for this site assumes the completion of the A5, A43 link road to the south of Towcester. Unfortunately, the link road is in the situation that Highways England have not yet signed off the detail required for the roundabouts, and there are further discussions with NCC and Highways England regarding detrunking Watling Street through Towcester, and traffic orders can then be developed to reduce traffic through the town centre. There's no timescale. Well, the facts are, and I've mentioned this on a number of occasions at various council meetings, all the information I've ever had from Highways England is that under no circumstances will they detrunk the A5. It's a trunk road, and that's not a possibility. So our hope in terms of improving air quality isn't connected to the relief road at all. But then the report then goes on to say it's our concern that the roundabout to the northeast of Towcester will have the effect of drawing traffic through Towcester and in effect bypass the bypass, and therefore the road traffic orders restricting traffic through Towcester will be necessary to reduce pollution levels. Well, we can't make orders to reduce the traffic coming down Northampton Road if there's a roundabout there, and that is a significant problem for the town. And we have strove with the support of SNC's officers to improve air quality in Towcester. Mitigating measures have been few and far between, and where it's improved, it's been entirely down to periods when the road's been under reconstruction and so forth. So that is a huge issue for the town. It isn't just an issue for residents on the Shire's development, it's an issue for the whole of Towcester. And I think part of that is directly related again to the over-reliance on warehousing and storage and distribution. This site would be, in my view, much more suited to manufacturing, to biotech, green technologies, other forms of technology. That would match the South Northants employment needs best. We've got a plethora of warehousing going up at Silverstone, most of it speculative with no end user in sight. With more concentration on manufacturing or technology, the buildings wouldn't have to have the bulk and scale as has been proposed here now. But so overall, I think there are too many issues unresolved. There are issues, as I say, with sustainability. There's a whole catalogue in the report of issues that haven't been identified as being satisfactory. There's issues about landscaping, which in the order of things are more minor, and obviously the big issues about transport movements. So I can't support this application, Chairman. I think it's premature. We should be looking at resolving particularly those environmental and sustainability issues and gain greater clarification on measures that could reduce or eliminate in full the adverse impact of additional traffic onto the A5 in the centre of Towcester, which, as I say, is an air quality monitoring zone. I mean, we should be doing things that will improve air quality. We shouldn't be approving applications that are going to have a negative impact. And overall, we should be working with the applicant to develop better uses in terms of, as I say, green technology, biotech and the like. I mean, many people are now retired in Towcester, moved to the area to work at Caswell Research Station, which led the world in silicon technology. It's these sort of fields we should be looking at, not sheds. I mean, as members know, I've been no great in favour of Brexit, but I mean, one thing I am in support of Brexiteers is this is an opportunity now for Britain to turn to more manufacturing and turn away from just being a land of sheds importing goods from other countries. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Now, some other councillors might like to express their opinions. Councillor Cooper.
Sorry, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. I would like to sort of come in and put a different aspect on it to what Councillor Johns has given us. I agree with the ideas of employment that he's talking about and going down that route. But we have got Silverstone, which is a massive technical site, which is very, very close to us and very well established and doing a great job over there. I see this site as smaller units that I don't see would be suitable for taking it down the technical route. I feel that as we are so close to SNC not existing any longer, I feel that we need to move forward with this, as this is an outline application with all matters reserved. I worry that, you know, in just over 2 months' time, we won't be here. And my concerns are then who or how will the decisions be made and where will that leave us? So those are my concerns. Am I able to ask Mr. Newton for his input on that?
You can ask a question if you want to, yeah.
May I ask Mr. Newton's comments on how we would stand if we didn't move forward with this then today? How will we stand when we become the West, if that's all right? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. That's a nice hospital pass for me. I think the short answer is I can't give you a definitive answer because the structure of the West Council hasn't been formally confirmed yet, and the decision-making process for planning committee hasn't been formally agreed yet. So I can't give you the answer because there isn't one yet. As far as making the decision today, my advice would be that it's an allocated site. A lot of the more strategic issues that would come with a site of this kind of scale have been considered in the local plan hearings, and the independent inspector then took the view that it was a good site to be allocated, and the council then adopted a plan with the site allocated within it. The points of detail that need to be resolved, then they are, in the main, they are detailed techie points. So from my advice to committee members would be that I think you're in a good position to be able to show support in principle for this development, and we will still maintain control over all of those points of detail, and we won't be issuing permission anyway, and until we're in the position to be able to show that we've got all those points of detail resolved. The longer that there's a delay, then the greater the chance there is that it goes out of South Northampton Council's hands, because South Northampton Council won't exist. So I suppose from that point of view, yeah, there is a risk that somebody else would make the decision, but as far as how and who, I can't give you a definitive answer, I'm afraid.
Well, we have before us the application, which is, as it today, yeah, I'm just going to make an observation that we have to consider what's before us today, and of course we can't anticipate the future. But Councillor Cooper, what would you like to add?
Sorry, yes, if I just may then come back to Mr. Newton on that. If we were to not go with Mr. Longbottom's recommendation today and not approve this application, would we be subject then to the application going to appeal? And how do you feel about that?
Well, that would be for the applicants, presumably, to decide what they do, wouldn't it, Mr. Newton?
Yeah, but how do you feel on?
Well, yeah. So if the resolution today was to refuse permission, then the first thing the committee would need would be strong defensible reasons for refusal. And my personal view, well, I don't have any strong defensible reasons for refusal in front of me, so I can't really comment on that in detail. However, I would say in principle, what we have here is less than 6 months old allocated site in a brand new local plan. So I wouldn't like my chances in defending an in principle decision to refuse permission, which is effectively what an outline is. It's very similar to a site allocation. So the site allocation says, in principle, based on what we know about the site, it's okay for it to be developed. And an outline planning application says, in principle, based on what we know about the site, it's okay for it to be developed. So I think in 6 months, with all of the work that's gone on before that, and since the plan was found sound by the inspector and then subsequently adopted, I think we would be on very shaky grounds.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pritchard, would you like to say something?
Thank you very much, and thank you. Obviously, this particular area has actually been included in and fully approved in our local plan part 2. If we were to actually approve this, could we have the total assurances, and I think probably it would be Mr. Newton to actually approve this, to ensure that the transport authorities, whether it's Highways England, NCC, or whoever it may be, will actually give us the information that's appropriate, so that any of the concerns that we have with regards to transport will actually be achieved.
Mr. Newton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, the two highway authorities. So if I deal with Highways England first, so the Highways England have effectively said to us not to issue a planning permission until they've agreed the details of that roundabout, which is the subject of their holding representation. So yeah, absolutely, we won't be issuing a planning permission without Highways England being absolutely content. The County Highway Authority, which will then in time become the part of the West Northamptonshire Unitary Authority. Again, they're technical experts, and their expertise is way beyond mine around all of these technicalities. And so from my point of view, I would be going out on very, very far out on a limb to say, well, if they're not telling me it's okay, then I think it is, so I'm going to approve it. My view is that I would want there to be written assurance from both highway authorities that they're absolutely content before we issue a permission. And you know, that's part of the reason why I commissioned Mr. Clark to look at all of this technical highways evidence, because there was so much of it flying around, and I just needed some independent advice on what feels right, what doesn't feel right. And I see no reason why I wouldn't, if I needed to, there's no reason why I wouldn't ask Mr. Clark to have another look at it further down the line, just to be absolutely clear, because as a number of people have been saying, this is a big scheme, really important to us. We can't not have any highways impacts from something like this, but what we do need to do is make sure that it's safe and that the impacts that there are reasonable, and therefore I'm going to be relying on the experts for that.
Just picking up on that, Mr. Newton, you I raised this earlier. Given what you say about we're still waiting for highways and they haven't yet said yes, why are we making any decision now? Why don't we wait until we hear back from them, which could be within the month, and they come back to our February meeting?
Well, I think we don't know when the when Highways England will make their final decision. I think there's other work that the applicant and the case officer, Mr. Longbottom, can be going on with the other points of detail in the meantime, and I think it gives us all confidence that if we have a resolution from the committee to say, in principle, we would like to support this scheme in outline, it gives everybody the confidence to keep going. It gives it gives me something to show to the highway authorities to keep momentum with the work that they're doing, to say, come on, committee has supported this in principle. We don't want to leave this dragging on for months and months and months. We want this to be done. We want this over the line as quickly as you possibly can. It enables us to show that we are bringing forward the first site in our new local plan. It shows it's a good plan and that it's the right site at the right time. It's a really good time to be creating jobs, I'd suggest, with the economy, national economy and local economy going the way they are. So from my point of view, it felt right that we asked the committee now to make a resolution on this application, to kind of establish the principle and to give us something to keep the momentum going, because it feels like it's very nearly there. And if we didn't come to this meeting, then there's a risk that maybe we're nearly ready for the next meeting, but we're not quite. And before you know it, it's May.
Just to follow up, what happens if Highways England didn't want to come back with written authority or written approval of some of the recommendations?
Well, in that case, we would still be sitting with a resolution from the committee subject to that being resolved, and that would then allow us as the planning authority to focus our efforts on, together with the applicant and with our independent advisors, on resolving whatever issues that that Highways England would still have. But you've heard today from the applicant's one of the applicant's experts, I understand, that those are points of detail around, you know, curbing and such. So I don't anticipate that there would be a significant amount of problem with that. I'm not saying that there definitely won't be. I'm saying I don't anticipate that there would be.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Councillor Pritchard. Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened very carefully to everything that has been said by the officers, the objectors. I feel we're now in the position where we have a simple choice. We can either refuse the application and to an extent face the consequences. We created the local plan. Everything has been worked in accordance with the local plan, or we can approve the application and let the officers carry on to work out the fine detail. I was looking down to the recommendations. There are a whole number of things that require sorting out before the final permission is granted. And on that basis, I will propose that we approve this application.
Sorry, unmute my microphone. Thank you very much, Andy. But just hold that, if you will, for a moment, because I know Councillor Townsend would like to say something. Go ahead, Councillor Townsend.
We've been here for a couple of hours now debating, and actually what has been said is all very relevant, and one hopes that Mr. Longbottom and Mr. Newton have paid attention to what we've said. We are actually in a very quite difficult situation now, because we're damned if we go ahead, we're damned if we don't. I think that, as has been said, this is in our local plan, and in principle we therefore have probably got to go with it. There are a lot of things which I think members have quite rightly raised concerns, and one just hopes that they go through. I mean, one thing I can forecast is that the sheds, which Mr. Johns quite rightly points out, is we're not altogether keen, they're not going to produce many jobs. They will be the first ones to which there'll be a full application, because there is a terrific market for it, and no more so than after this virus business, because we can't buy anything now in shops, and that is likely to continue. So the first thing we're going to have is that, and then everything else might sort of come along. But I just don't see how we can really go against that. And I just hope that the officers, when this thing comes through, I mean, I shan't be here, and I don't know anyone, any of other members of the committee will be there. It depends on the elections or non-elections in May. But I just hope that we retain this desire, which I think we have managed so far, of making our sheds better sheds than elsewhere, and making certain that the design is right, the colour is right, the lighting is right, all those details, which actually Mr. Longbottom has been a real champion down at Brackley on that, and just needs to be continued. And I would be, my earnest exhortation is to officers, is we are very keen on our design, and we want this design to be carried forward into this scheme.
Thank you very much indeed. I see Councillor Johns, you've got your hand up, so I will turn to you.
Chairman, given the tenor of the discussion so far, can I firmly suggest that in terms of the proposal for a pedestrian crossing on Northampton Road, that we opt for the northernmost option, but also that a lot more work is done in terms of the proposed dual cycle walkway, because I'm not sure how that can be achieved really, because of the difference in levels between the existing footpath abutting what is presumably a protected wall around Easton Meston and the highway. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Well, no doubt Andrew has taken note of that. So you're suggesting the northern position for the Puffin crossing. I don't know whether anybody has got any particular disagreement on that. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, anybody else want to speak before we've got a proposal for this application, but before we go to that, and I'll have to seek a seconder, anybody else want to say something? No, you're all muted, so that gives me a fair steer that you don't want to say anything. But I do need to have somebody who'd like to second it, because Councillor Paul Wiltshire has proposed the acceptance of this recommendation as listed on our order paper. So who would like to say? Councillor Cooper, thank you very much indeed. Your hand flicked up first before anybody else's. Right, so I think we need to move then to a vote on this, because we have certainly had a lengthy discussion. I hope it's been useful, and I think the points, as Councillor Townsend just said, that we have raised through this debate, I trust will be duly noted, not just by the officers, but also by the applicants in the event we do approve this application, because it is a sensitive site and it is important that things are right. We're not against progress, but on the other hand, we want to temper it with protecting the locality, preserve and protect part of South Northamptonshire's watchwords. So go to you, Leslie Farrell. We have this recommendation.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could just go through the councillors then, please. So this is a vote to approve this outline application. So we'll start with Councillor Breeze.
4.
Councillor Budden.
4.
Councillor Clark.
4.
Councillor Cooper.
4.
Councillor Dallin.
4.
Councillor Hollowell.
4.
Councillor Johns.
Against.
Councillor Pritchard.
4.
Councillor Sergeson Brook.
She left the meeting, I think.
I think she has.
Yeah.
Councillor Townsend.
4.
Councillor Elaine Wiltshire.
Still muted.
Sorry, 4.
Thank you. And Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
4.
Thank you, Chairman. That's approved. It's just one against.
Indeed, thank you very much. Now, I'm going to ask the committee what they think. We've got to 4:30. You may think you need a cup of tea before we...
We certainly do.
Well, right, but we're not going to hit into Redstone yet. So it's now 4:30, as I say.
10 minutes is enough.
10 minutes, all right, 10 minutes, you have a fast kettle. 4:40, we'll be all back again. So the meeting is closed at 4:30, resuming 4:40. Thank you. Switch off your microphones and your screens, please.
Is that the postman? Is that all he bought?
Oh dear, oh dear.
Well, Richard, your forecast wasn't very good. Your forecast on timing wasn't absolutely wonderful.
Folks, we are still live on YouTube, just as a reminder.
Oh, right.
58 on that one stage, Richard.
Right.
It's down to 22 now.
Does that include us?
No, that's just on the YouTube side.
Let's see.
It is now 4:40. Welcome back to those of you watching on YouTube and the members of the Council Committee who are with us here on South Northants Council Planning Committee for this Thursday afternoon or early evening now. We move along, if we may. We have one more planning application to consider this afternoon, and this is at Radstone. This is land west of Whitfield Road in that village, and the planning officer is going to be Samuel Dix, who's going to talk us through this one. Over to you, Samuel.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you very much, everybody. This application is in full and is for the erection of a single self-built dwelling on land west of Whitfield Road in Radstone, as you say. The application is being determined at committee rather than delegated authority because it is made on behalf of a member of the council, Councillor Herring. I'll just share my screen now to run through the background. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, so just for wider context and perhaps for those members that aren't aware, Radstone is a small hamlet located around a mile to the north of Brackley. As you can see on my screen now, this is Brackley to the south and Radstone highlighted towards the north there. The site itself is located towards the centre of Radstone, such as it is. I'll move on to the location plan that I think you've got in your agenda. This shows the site outlined in blue. The settlement confines, as you can see by this dotted line here, run along the northern, eastern and southern edge of the application site. This dotted line here, which overlaps slightly with the confines, is a public right-of-way. Radstone is a small village in the Part 2 local plan, and as such, policy LH5 of the local plan states that in locations such as this that immediately adjoin the confines, single self-build dwellings will be acceptable in principle. I'm mindful that the committee did determine a self-build application at December's committee meeting, but nevertheless, the exact requirements of policy LH5 should be in sections 9.5 and 9.6 of the report. That's just an aerial again, just to give you an idea of where the site sits within the wider village. I'm just going to go through some photos for you now. Apologies, some of these are a bit repetitive because by the nature of the site, it currently is sort of underused and simply vegetated. So a lot of the photos will look the same despite being taken from various vantage points. So this is taken from Whitfield Road, looking southwards towards the site. On the right-hand side is Timbers, and the site is located just behind these trees here. This is taken at the northeast corner of the site, looking in towards it. This dwelling you can see behind the trees is the old schoolhouse. This is stood directly in the middle of the frontage of the site, looking back, looking directly towards the Grade 1 listed St Lawrence's Church, which if I zoom in, you'll appreciate that can't be seen due to the buffer of trees towards the rear of the site that is mentioned in the report. This is looking slightly further left from the same vantage point. Again, you can see the old schoolhouse on the left-hand side here, some trees towards the middle of the site, some of which will be removed, some of which have already gone effectively. You can see this clearing in here is effectively where the dwelling will sit. And that's looking back the other way towards the Timbers, which we just passed, this being the boundary of the site in the northeast corner. I now have a series of photos taken from the right of way that runs along the southern boundary of the site. These are the ones that are a bit repetitive, as I say, but just give an impression of the open or vegetated nature of the site across its entire depth. So that's looking back towards Whitfield Road there. That's looking back along the footpath that you can see there. There are 3 Scots pines in this corner here that are due to be removed. That's looking towards the timbers, so the dwelling will sit essentially in the middle of this shot here. And this is St Lawrence's Church, grade 1 listed towards the west of the site. And I've got a few photos taken back towards the site from the churchyard, just to show you that belt of trees there. This is a shot showing the open countryside around Radstone. My only real reason for showing you this is just to demonstrate the proposed route for HS2, which will pass around the middle ground of this photo, close to the horizon there, around 1 kilometre away. And then this is just looking back down again from the footpath in the other direction. And then 2 final shots just showing the proposed access point. So this is looking northwards up Whitfield Road and southwards down Whitfield Road from the point of access. The extent of the site and its boundaries are relevant to 2 aspects of the proposal. Firstly, in respect of ownership, you'll note in the report, sorry, I'm just waiting for my plans to load, that the original layout included areas of land that may not be owned by the applicant. As such, there is a revised layout here. So for comparative purposes, I just thought I'd show you this now to show you the areas that are now omitted from the site and point out the fact that they don't change the development in any real way. We've still got the access in this corner. The dwelling's still exactly the same position. All that is changed is this notional bin storage here has been moved forward by around 1 metre, 2 metres there. And this area been taken out of the site, and this slither in the corner here has been taken out. So there has been no change to the development despite those ambiguities. The dwelling itself, if I move on to that. Oh, my screen is too small. The dwelling itself is a 4-bed detached house set over 2 floors of accommodation. This just shows the sort of fairly conventional floor plan of the dwelling. It will be finished in red brick with cedar style timber composite cladding with a slate roof. These are all 4 elevations of the dwelling. I have requested colorized elevations of the front and side elevations just to give you a bit more of an impression of how it will look in terms of its color. As indicated in the report, the vernacular in Radstone is more mixed than quite a few other villages in the district, but in the immediate vicinity, it does tend towards brick as opposed to stone. What I was intending to do was just to go into street view to give you an idea of some of the surrounding properties, and the site should be to our rear now, and that is before some of the existing or previous trees were thinned out on the site, and also obviously also taken in the summer months. So this is the old schoolhouse to the immediate south of the site. Similarly, you can see finished in red brick with slate roof. And then as we move down here, the Merton College cottages, Victorian style, gable frontages like the proposed dwelling, red brick, slate roof. It's only really towards the other end of Radstone where you tend to get more stone built properties such as this. So there is despite being a small hamlet, there is a degree of diversity in the design. As an anomaly as well, there are 2 sort of post-war bungalows directly opposite the site that we would suggest have no real bearing in design terms. The proposed dwelling is contemporary in appearance, but nevertheless is considered by officers to have sufficient regard to the design guide and surrounding area, particularly bearing in mind it is a self-build proposal where applicants are supposed to have an input into the design and appearance of the dwelling. One final thing I did have to show you was the appeal that was dismissed on the site in 2013, just to give you an idea of what was previously considered acceptable in design character terms. That was without this double garage towards the front here, and as you can see, the dwelling was orientated across the site. That scheme also predated the district design guide, for full disclosure. There was also one final plan I had to show you, but I have to apologise that it might take a long time to load because it's very large, but I do think it's helpful in terms of the scale of the dwelling. Hopefully seeing that render in real time. So just to show you that, so that this is basically a section from Whitfield Road, and it shows the timbers to the north of the site, the old schoolhouse to the south, and then the proposed dwelling sitting between them of a comparable scale and height. It is a large dwelling as acknowledged in the report, but the plot itself is large, and the separation distances and the height are considered to be acceptable by officers. There are a number of conditions that are recommended to be attached in order to retain control over the appearance of the dwelling and protect the setting of the surrounding area. These include the removal of all permitted development rights. Subject to these conditions and the completion of the council's standard unilateral undertaking regarding self-build, it is recommended that permission is granted. That concludes the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, you alluded to last month when we had a self-build application. For the benefit of councillors who might have forgotten how the policy on that, and for those watching, just remind us what the self-build policy now is.
Okay, yeah, so policy LH5 supports self-build, as I say, on sites immediately adjoining settlement confines. The requirements are that the applicants or the first occupiers have to demonstrate a local connection, and they have to demonstrate ongoing involvement in the design and build process, both of which are secured by unilateral undertaking, and both of which we are satisfied in this instance would be the case.
I'm grateful. Right, questions to you, Councillor Bignell.
Hang on. Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, the screening of this property from the Grade 1 listed church is by what I would call the wild wood. Would that be fair? And whose tenure is that wild wood in, such that we could preserve that as a barrier between the church and the house if we were so minded? Because I believe we don't have any control over the tenure of those trees, so we couldn't put any conditions on it. Question.
So can I jump straight in with that, Chair? Is that okay?
Go ahead, yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Sorry, there was one plan that I had up that I don't think I actually shared in the end. So if I go back to sharing, if that's okay. There is this site location plan here. I should have mentioned that the site is outlined in red here, but the applicants also own, as you can see outlined in blue here, an area that's not within the site. So it's not within the garden of the dwelling, but it does provide a sort of 20-metre additional landscape buffer. And we can attach conditions that would cover that area if the applicants own it. So the landscaping scheme.
Are we sure they own it before we put a condition on? I don't know. I mean, that's the only thing that's protecting the church from the building is that wild wood.
I've no reason to doubt that area. As I say, ownership issues did come up in respect of areas towards the front of the site, but nothing to the rear, as far as I know.
Well, we have the applicant coming before us in due course, so that might be an opportune moment to ask a question about ownership. Anyone else? Yeah, Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Chair. One thing I didn't notice, and perhaps the officer could confirm, I didn't notice anything about garages.
No garage proposed.
So there isn't?
No, so the appeal sketch I showed was from 2013, and in that instance, the garage was controversial. So if I had to speculate, I would assume the applicant has omitted it from this application for ease.
Would that come under PDRs?
It would, but we've removed those permitted development, recommended that those permitted development rights be removed.
If they wanted to put a garage there, they would have to go through the usual planning application process.
They would. A garage forward of the dwelling wouldn't be permitted development, so it would only be permitted development if it was behind the principal elevation. But the permitted development rights that we've removed are such that even that wouldn't be PD anymore. It would need a planning application. Yes.
Thank you, officer.
Thank you very much. Right, anyone else wants to ask a question? No, perhaps Councillor Pritchard of Bignell would remove your yellow hands on the screen since you're not asking a question at the moment. I'm grateful. Right, we'll move on if we may then, because we have two speakers for this application. We're going to hear first of all from a local resident, Mike Edwards, who I see on my screen in front of me is there poised to speak. So first of all, let's establish we can hear you. Good afternoon, Mr. Edwards.
Hi there.
Hello. Right, you have 3 minutes in which to make your remarks, and then if you stay put in case anybody wants to ask you a question. So go ahead.
My name's Mike Edwards. I live at the Timbers, right next door to the proposed development. I'm very disappointed that the planning committee report glosses over most of the key issues, and I'm concerned that none of my neighbours have been invited to speak, despite the number of issues raised. One of the main problems is that I actually have no idea where the house will be situated, as each drawing shows it's in a very different position. It's either very close to the boundary or some distance away, but there is no consistency. Each iteration of the planning application has been rather disingenuous about the boundaries of the site. I assume to increase the claimed visibility when joining the road, whilst conveniently ignoring neighbouring trees and hedges. It has by far the most limited view of any property of the village when joining the road, and is way below the standards required by any legislation. The original application claimed ownership of a rather large chunk of land owned by Merton College and other land belonging to the Timbers. It's ironic that it was actually Tony Herring's own drawings that laid out these boundaries when he purchased the field from Merton College, which are very different from those in the original and the current application. Subsequent revisions have restored some of the boundaries, but still take some land from the Timbers and another section from Merton College, which, whilst the land registry shows as belonging to the Herrings, John Gloag from the Estates Bursar at Merton College insists was never sold and is still owned by the college. This is actually supported by Tony Herring's own drawings at the time of the purchase. John has said they will be contesting the boundary with the land registry to have this corrected. I would therefore respectfully request the Planning Commission to suspend this application until the boundary issues can be resolved and the Herrings can decide where the house is to be located, as I can't see how the committee can make a decision based on the information presented. The tree survey has the house over 3 metres from the boundary, conveniently just outside the root span of some of our trees. On the main plan is less than 1.5 metres from the boundary and right amongst the tree roots. The survey conveniently omits the tallest trees in our garden. We have 3 conifer type trees that are very notable in the local landscape, excuse me, of between 10 and 12 metres tall, where the roots of this type of tree sit just 30 to 60 centimetres below the surface, i.e. given that the property is going to be sunk down into the landscape, these roots will actually be above the ground level of the proposed house. These roots currently extend up to 5.5 metres into the field, which is over halfway through the proposed development site and right through the house. If this application goes ahead, the roots for all our boundary trees will be destroyed, leaving them unstable and making even standing in our garden a dangerous proposition. Whilst our house should be safe, our garage, patio and part of the driveway will be in direct line of fire should these trees come down. The report justifies the disturbance from the development just 20 metres from our bedroom window because we already have to endure the disturbances from HS2 half a mile away. This is unfair, especially as my partner and I are disabled. If this proposal goes ahead, we will have neighbours looking straight into our bedroom window, we will lose our views and privacy from the garden, and our trees will become dangerously unstable. My girlfriend cannot leave the house without assistance. She suffers from frequent migraines amongst other more serious conditions and receives hospital treatment at least every quarter. We moved here for the peace and quiet, for the wildlife and for the privacy. The garden animals are our only source of pleasure, and this development will destroy that. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Edwards. Well, anyone want to ask him a question? Yes, Councillor Breeze.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Wood, sorry, it's Mr. Wood English?
No, Edwards.
Mr. Edwards, I do apologise.
I answered to most things.
You're a tenant of the Timbers, I understand from your objection. Has your landlord objected to the application and the points that you've raised?
The Savills who run the property on behalf of HS2 have made an objection, but it would appear that HS2 themselves weren't notified. Excuse me. As part of the planning application, there was a letter from HS2 saying that they had no issues with the development impacting their rail developments, but they hadn't commented and weren't aware that it impacted properties that they owned. So I'm still waiting for feedback from HS2 as whether they have their own issues. But certainly Merton College and Savills have issues with the planning application.
Oh yeah, but they haven't raised issues in regards to trees or that sort of issue. And HS2, who obviously were consulted, haven't raised any issues either in relation to.
HS2 weren't made aware that the timbers belonged to them, so it was only they were only approached by as far as how the railway was impacted rather than their own property.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions of Mr. Edwards? No? Well, thank you very much, Mr. Edwards. If you would like to switch your microphone off and your screen, but you can obviously still hear what we're saying. We'll turn to our second speaker now, if we may, who is the applicant, Mr. Tony Herring. If you could switch on your screen, there you are, and good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Chair. And
right, if you'd like to go ahead for your 3 minutes worth, off you go.
Thank you. We moved to Radstone in 1999 to live in the old schoolhouse and bought the adjacent plot of land, which did include the frontage, and the additional garden area for our kids to play in. 12 years later, we applied for approval to build a house on the land which was, at the time, not supported by policy and was rejected. Over 20 years, circumstances have changed. The confirmation of the HS2 project has led to our present house being bought by the government, not by choice, out of necessity, under HS2 Need to Sell scheme. We had no wish to leave Radstone and now apply to provide our home under the self-build policy. We believe that we have now met all the policy criteria required by SNC for such a project. There is very little that's not been addressed in the case officer's report, which is both thorough and comprehensive. However, in the light of some objections from neighbours, I thought it necessary to address a few concerns held by village residents. These fall into three categories: land boundaries, water table, and ecology. In terms of the land ownership, we have submitted our title deed, which highlights the extents of the land we own. The application site boundary has been adjusted slightly in the northwest corner to accord with a title deed held by HS2 in regard to timbers. This has had no impact upon the position of the proposed house. A neighbour comment refers to flooding, which is due to their garaging being set at a lower contour than the surrounding levels. And in heavy rainfall, the water drains from the road and settles at this low point. Our site is set higher than the road and in 20 years has never suffered from any flooding. The other issue raised is ecology, for which a report was commissioned in July 2020, carried out by Philip Irving, ecologist, who stated that the development would not have any impact on any habitats of interest in the area. However, as his suggestion, mitigation measures will be incorporated in a landscape plan. We've taken care to site the new house so that it does not harm the amenity of any adjacent dwelling, and the accommodation provided is less than we currently enjoy for our home and office. The property sits back from the road and is screened by trees, and we propose to maintain a landscape buffer at the rear boundary to improve biodiversity and protect the setting of the church. We have also further reduced the proposed ridge height to reflect the scale of adjacent properties. Although the area is somewhat blighted by the impending construction of HS2, mitigation measures are promised by them to protect the village in future once the railway is completed. The self-build project will provide us with a replacement home and will be a sustainable project, employing local builders, subcontractors and suppliers, contributing to the local economy wherever possible. Thank you. I'll be happy to address any questions or concerns that members may have.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, indeed, we'd have an opportunity for questions. I don't know whether Councillor Bignell, you asked a question earlier of the officer, whether you want to ask the same question now of the applicant.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I was concerned about the screening from the wooded area at the bottom of the red line, who actually own that and whether that could be preserved in perpetuity to provide screening between the new property and the Grade 1 listed church, please.
Mr. Herring?
Yes, to answer that question, we do own the south boundary, which is shared with St Lawrence's Church. The trees are on the church property, but we do endorse the need to keep this as a landscape buffer zone. This has been shown on the drawings, and this will be subject to a detailed landscape proposal, which will accompany any condition approval that's required.
So the majority of the trees within the area, and the only trees that are on your ownership is on the boundary of the red line in effect. So the rest are in the somebody else's ownership, and we would
Correct,
have to
yes.
seek permission there. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Interruption, but that's not true.
No, I'm sorry. We can't hear from you at this point. We've heard from you, Mr. Edwards. Can we go now to Councillor Pritchard, please?
Thank you. One thing that Mr. Edmonds mentioned about the proximity of
Mr. Edwards. Let's get his name right.
Apologies. He mentioned with regards to the proximity of the house close to the boundaries, and there seemed to be some sort of discrepancy of how close it actually was. Could it actually be clarified?
Yes, the proximity of the house nearest to timbers, for instance, is 3 meters. But the proximity of the house to timbers itself is something like 17.5 meters.
Right. So when he made the statement that it's 1.5 meters, that is not correct.
The boundary does actually taper, and it tapers towards the area of the bin store, which was the area that we adjusted when we consulted with the owners via Savills, because we hadn't been party to the sale area agreement when timbers was sold to HS2.
Thank you, Mr. Herring.
Thank you very much. Councillor Townsend.
Could you just clarify, I mean, as to who owns what? How HS2 owns timbers, but
yes.
Does it own any other houses? I mean, was that because they wanted to sell, or what's I mean?
No, the timbers. Sorry to interrupt. Timbers was bought again, also on a need to sell scheme for very similar reasons, and also HS2 own the Radstone Manor, which is the property next door but one to that, and another property on the Radstone Road as well. So the railway company has purchased, properties that are just outside the compensation zone for based on the need to sell scheme.
And so from their point of view, they will then want to resell them once the railway's up. Is that the way it goes?
Well, yes. I mean, their interim approach is to be able to rent them at market rate, and yeah. Yes, they will probably sell them back into the market, into the open market on completion. Yes.
Fine, thanks.
Thank you very much. Anyone else want to ask a question of Mr. Herring? I see. Yes, Councillor Paul Wilshire. Your microphone's is muted still. Go ahead.
Pardon. Mr. Herring, just to go back to the distance between your house and Timbers perimeter and Timbers the building, you said that the land tapers to about 1.5 meters at the bin store end of the garden. What is the minimum distance between your house and Timbers' house at that point?
I think the minimum distance would probably be about 2 meters, maybe 1.8, if you allow for foundations.
So at that point, it is less than 2 meters between the two house walls.
No. You mustn't mistake the boundary with the property wall.
Well, that's what the question I asked was, what is the difference between the two house walls?
Oh, I see. It's approximately 18 meters.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much indeed.
Can I suggest we ask these questions to the officer and not the applicant?
Well, the officer can indeed. Sam, do you want to answer the question?
It's in section 9.19 of the report. I had measured it at 21 meters based on the scale provided on the drawings.
All right, well, there we are. There's an answer. We've got 2 answers, really, but thank you, Councillor Johns, for intervening there. Anybody actually else want to ask a question of Mr. Herring before I let him, well, not go, but effectively go? No? All right, well, thank you very much. If you'd like to mute your microphone, please, and also your screen, turn that off.
Chairman, do you think we could ask the speakers to leave the meeting now so they don't look like they're part of the decision-making process?
I will, yes. Would both speakers then please leave the meeting, and thank you for your participation, both of you, and our discussions will continue without you. Right, well, there you go. We've heard from the two speakers. We now have a chance to talk about this, and we'll start with the ward member, Councillor Paul Wiltshire. You'd like to kick us off, please?
Thank you, Chairman. It's fair to say that this application has produced rather a frenzy of comment from the local area. I've winnowed through and tried to produce the ones that might have some relevance. Their first query was whether or not the principle of development was met. As far as I can see from the officer's report, it has been met. The various arguments put forward in the letter I've received don't apply. The other main argument is actually on the design of the house. Although there has been a reference to the disparate design up and down Radstone Village, there is a preponderance for dormer type windows on many of the buildings relating to the Merton Cottage style of architecture. There was a request I see from the officer that this might be incorporated into the design. That again has been, the applicant is unwilling to accept this. Whether that refusal is reasonable, it's hard to say. But certainly the design is different. It's designed to be contemporary, but one wonders how contemporary it needs to be. And there's also been some reference to the balcony, which is on the south side of the building. Again, references to loss of privacy to surrounding houses. As far as I can see, I don't see a great deal of loss of privacy, but perhaps the officer might like to comment on that. I should have asked him before, I beg your pardon. The other thing really is about the ecology of the area. There have been particular controversy or problems in Radstone for the last 20 odd years with literally bats in the belfry. St Lawrence's Church has been unusable for an awful long time because it's been infested with a colony of bats that won't go away. But these bats have now established a good sized colony in there, and they do use various flight paths to get to their feeding grounds. One of these flight paths is out of the east end of the church, straight down the green corridor provided by the site for this house, and then loop out round and go down to an SSI farther down where they do their feeding. The suggestion is that this flight path will be disturbed by the construction of the house, and it may well be that we should look for some mitigation for this. There is no question of the bats being moved. I understand that the church is undergoing some kind of programme where a false roof is provided in the chancel, which allows the bats to live above it and prevent them from fouling the church, the interior of the church, which is the main reason why the church can't be used now. All these factors have been brought to my attention by some of the residents of Radstone, and I bring them to the committee's attention. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. You raised a question about loss of privacy, so let's bring in Samuel Dix, the officer, just to answer that one, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There is a balcony towards the rear of the property, as been pointed out. I was going to try and share my screen again, if that's okay, because I could point out the fact that it's a recessed balcony. But I am fearful that I have rather too many PDFs open. Presumably you can see the tree protection plan now.
Oh, can you see something?
That's not what I want to show you, unfortunately. I'm trying to show you the floor plans. Unfortunately, my screen is struggling. I'll move on to. I'll stop sharing my screen and move on to ecology. Try and shut some reports down whilst I'm at it. In terms of ecology, the council psychologist has reviewed the application, raises no objections. In terms of mitigation, condition 29 concerns that specifically in terms of no external lighting being installed within the habitat buffer. And that I guess that could be strengthened to say not just within the habitat buffer but directed towards it. So that mitigation is in there. The colony of Natterer's bats is well known as you've pointed out, but our own ecologist has reviewed and has raised no objection. So we don't really have grounds to depart from that advice.
How's your screen looking? Have you?
It's still struggling. It's not responding. I was very fearful this would happen as I.
Well, I tell you what, I'll ask for somebody else to say something whilst you play around with your screen and see if we can get somewhere. Anybody else like to? Councillor Hollowell, yes. And
thank you, Chairman. It's an interesting one. First of all, regarding the principle of development, I mean, I'm largely with that. My only small criticism of the report is in 9.6 on page 138, because what Samuel is saying there, what is basically saying is that there is an adopted highway there, and he says there is simply no reason to doubt that utilities can be provided in the boundary of the site. Now, I don't have any doubts either, but what needs to be emphasised here is that is more than just a casual observation. Part of the definition of self-build is that it is on a serviced site. And that phrase service site is defined in legislation, and it's also defined in the local plan part 2 in 4.6.4 prior to the actual policy itself. And it just the way it reads, it's not very strong. You know, there is similarly no reason to doubt. Well, we ought to know that there is or there isn't. I'm as sure as Samuel is that there are all those facilities there, but it is part of the package. I'm not really too worried about these boundaries because we don't normally get too concerned with property ownership unless it materially affects the development. I'm more concerned that the area, I think Councillor Bignell referred it as wilderness or scrub, the buffer zone between the grade 1 listed building and this site, I'm concerned that is not within the planning area, which is shown as a blue line. Normally it's a red line, but and I would just feel more confident because this is very close to a grade 1 listed building, very unusual, and I would feel more secure if at least if we got all of that within the planning line. Finally, the design. I think it's a nice design. The question is it the right design in the right place? When one looks on Street View, you'll see that on one side we've got a lot of red brick buildings, and on the other side a lot of what look to be mainly barn conversions with stone and this dark coloured boarded cladding. And I get the feeling that what the architect has done, he's tried to use elements of both. So he's ended up with red brick and brown cladding. When you look at the surrounding properties, with the exception of the modern bungalows, which are set back from the road, all of the other buildings have got chimneys. This one doesn't. Several of the existing buildings have got dormer windows. This one doesn't. And so I take a little bit of issue again with Samuel on page 143 when he says in 9.38 something like it's sufficiently in keeping with the surrounding area and the design guide. Well, what the design guide actually says is at 4.191, this is on page 233, what it actually says is where traditional architectural styles are used as a basis for designing new development, they must be followed in a manner that is faithful to traditional precedents, form, scale and detailed design in the local context. And so I rather feel that there's an argument here that this is not following the local context closely enough, that we ought to have seen chimneys there, and ideally we ought to have seen chimneys and dormer windows. I'll leave it for the committee to decide. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to go back to Samuel because I'm anxious to know as to whether he's got his screen in action. So we've still got this loss of privacy question to answer yet, Sam?
I do, thankfully. So I'll just share my screen again if that's okay. Sorry, bear with me. Okay, hopefully you can see the floor plans now.
Yes.
So the balcony in question is here, and on the privacy matter, I just want to point out to members that it is a recessed balcony. So you have the walls on either side. So in terms of the outlook, it is towards the west of the site, along the garden, and that's borne out by these here. You can see the walls either side. So in terms of the outlook, it is the same as any first floor window would be. It's just simply an outdoors area on the floor plans there. There's no sideways looking from that balcony towards either of the adjoining properties. So hopefully that helps answer the question in that regard. In respect of Councillor Hollowell's points about was there a question about the serviced element?
Well, I think he wanted to know what your observations were on this. It's sure. He's probably okay, but he'd like some a bit more reassurance.
Yeah, no, in situations like this where there are dwellings either side that are clearly serviced, we would take the view that there's no reason, as I've said in the report, there's no reason to doubt that this dwelling couldn't take the same services. There is, I think, on one of the plans, the applicant's no longer in the meeting, are they? But they have identified on one of the plans the point of connection to the drainage, for example, and the electricity. So that's the reason why the report is phrased along the lines of "there's no reason to doubt."
Can I come in? Yes, can I just come in on that? I don't disagree with you, Samuel. The point I was making was that the committee need to understand how important that is to the policy. That's all.
I think, yeah, if this was a more isolated site that weren't dwellings around it, I think there would certainly be a lot more interrogation of that point in the report. In terms of the design, I'm not sure I have much more to add than what's in the report. It is noted that we did sort of seek dormers and we did seek chimneys. However, that there is a slight tension here in terms of it being a self-build dwelling, so that the applicants have to demonstrate their own ongoing involvement in the design and the build. And if we overly influence that, there's a slight contradiction with that policy, isn't there, in terms of them having their own input. So that's why we've reached a balanced judgment on that. There are things, I do have the original elevations, if that might help. I can show you a few of the things that we've negotiated away, if that would help, just to show you what's improved. Is that worth showing?
Yeah, an interesting point you make there, that you don't want to influence too much what they do because it's a self-build, but I mean, presumably there are limitations. They can't just build anything they like or do anything they like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, design is always subjective, and if members want to see something better, then entirely entitled to do so. Can I just show you these original elevations just to illustrate some of the points made in the report? So I think these are the original ones here. So there's things like the brick soldier courses over the windows. Oh, not the right windows. So these have now been replaced by stone lintels, so that's much more in keeping with the design guide. These exposed rafters here, those have been removed since then, and some of the windows along this northwest elevation have been consolidated. So one of the roof lights has been removed. These windows have been merged together to be smaller. So we have negotiated smaller amendments, but the features you're talking about in terms of the dormers and in terms of chimneys, we haven't secured those, and it's it is members' judgment if you feel that we really ought to have been pushing that point.
All right, well, let's go and see from somebody else. Councillor Bignell.
Can I just check with you, Chairman, whether we're in question mode or discussion mode?
Well, I think we're in discursive mode.
I don't want to discuss if I'm supposed to be asking. I want to discuss. I don't want to ask a question. I don't want to.
No, well, you discuss. We'd like to hear what you've got to say, I think.
So to me, there's three things on this. The first one is I accept the principal development. It is what it is, but it's in our policy. That's fine. Two, I'm not happy with the screening between the two. We have no control, I believe, over the screening of the church from this building. And in the absence of that, I can't feel I can support it. And thirdly, I'm not an architect or whatever, but the design doesn't. It's hard, as Stephen Hollowell said, to take cues from the surrounding buildings, but there are cues in terms of dormers, chimneys, things like that. And I think this has completely ignored that. And we, as a committee, it's down to us what we can accept as a design. I know there's a negotiation, and we shouldn't be authoritarian, but it doesn't satisfy or tick my boxes as a design. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Pritchard.
Just one point of clarification. Is this 3 stories or is it 2 stories, ground floor, first and second? Because obviously I've noticed there's dormer windows in the roof. So is that another story?
Sam, you better answer that one.
There are roof lights, which is for loft storage, and there's a condition specifically restricting that to storage only, not habitable accommodation.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anyone else like to? Yes, Councillor Townsend.
Yeah, I'd add to the design things. I don't know what you do about it, but actually, basically, I don't like this thing of mixing materials. So you've got this rendering and you've got these 2 things which seem to be fighting each other. I quite agree. I'm a champion of chimneys, but it is in a village. I mean, it's surrounded by not particularly, as far as I can see, distinguished buildings. So how far you can go, I don't know, but I would agree. I would be unhappy with the thing, and I don't like the gable. The way the gable is completely the same height as the main house as well. So there are little design things which I think are quite important, but how far one can go, I just don't know. Without, either you could, in a way, you could either refuse it or you've got to approve it. Can we tinker with it or not?
Well, Samuel, do you want to comment on that? I mean, I was just going to say you can go as far as to either reject it or support it. There you are. I mean, we have what we have before us today. That's the point. This is the planning application we've got, so we have to consider it as to what we've got. Let's go to you, Councillor Breeze.
Thank you, Chair. We've got an application before us, and we can't really design by committee. We've seen Samuel's comments that they've made suggestions, and the applicant has accepted some and rejected others. I think I know we've had many a debate about chimneys, but they're generally on estates. So our design guide really was developed with the likes of Radstone Fields, where we wanted to respect the vernacular within the district. I don't think we need to apply it quite so rigidly on every individual property. It is a self-build. There is some room for people's idiosyncrasies, and if they don't want a chimney, particularly if they haven't got a wood-burning stove or an open fire, why would they need a chimney? And I think the same with a dormer. I think a dormer will change the aspect of the house. So we have before us an application from an architect who is, my understanding, well regarded and well used within the district. He's put an application before us, and I think if we're going to quibble over every single little aspect of it, then that's not our role. It's overall, it's the overall package. In terms of the view of the church, my understanding was that we heard earlier that actually the trees and shrubs that screen the church are not actually in the applicant's control. They are across the border, across the boundary, and so they would have no influence on whether they're there or not. It will be up to the church ward and the church authorities as to whether the screening remains, and I suspect it will remain. So I can't really see any way that we could reject this, particularly based on the inspector's comments from 2012 or 2013. It fulfills our local policy, and in terms of design, I think it's absolutely fine in a village which doesn't really have a consistent design theme going through it. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cooper, you were shaking your head slightly. I don't know whether you want to say something.
I don't want us to go round and round in circles about chimneys, but I was thinking back about the very difficult planning application we had with the Queen Victoria pub here in Gayton a couple of years ago. And there are a pair of semi-detached houses in what was the car park at the Queen Victoria, and they're very, very tiny houses. And committee was adamant that they would not let that application go through without chimneys, and they're very tiny houses, and I can't see what kind of I haven't been in them, but what kind of fireplace they've got in those tiny semi-detached houses. But we were adamant, and we made that builder. So that is one very prominent for me show that we were adamant about chimneys. So I would just disagree there with Councillor Breeze, that it's not always when we do the big developments. You know, this is in a village, and in keeping with the village, we ensured that these two tiny little semis had to have chimneys. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Johns.
I have to agree with Councillor Breeze. I think it's not for this committee to micromanage and design the application. I don't think it adversely affects the street scene. I mean, all these things are quite highly subjective, really, and unless there is good policy reasons for refusal, which there plainly isn't, I'm in support.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bignell.
Councillor John says there's no reason to policy reasons to reject it. There is, because the church, if it sawed down its trees, would then, out of control of those trees, not allow them to be screened. And it is a Grade 1 listed church. When we had a controversial, we'll go back another controversial application in Stoke Bruin, well, that was a Grade 2 listed thing, and a new house being built. All hell let loose from the environmental people. Like, you can't possibly show this, show that. And there was a whole forest had to be there to ensure it was screened from this. Whereas this, we've got a few skunky trees on a bit of old ground that we've no control over, that could just ruin the setting of that lovely building.
All right, thank you. We've got Councillor Elaine Wiltshire next lined up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the church being so close, or fairly close to the property, can we put a condition on that we have extra screening at the bottom end of the garden to give the church a bit more privacy? There's the item of having properties near churches, I do not disagree with, because we've got the same scenario down in Brackley, where we had a whole estate of about 7 houses built by the church in Brackley. So, and they haven't got all these trees. But I think if people are worried about that they need more trees for diversity, ecology, I think we need to put a condition on that we have some extra screening, extra trees in the bottom end of the garden. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Samuel, let's confirm we could put a condition to that effect if we so wished.
It would be contained, well, effectively contained and covered by condition 10 regarding the landscaping scheme. So a specific element could be added to that referred to, screening in that regard.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Paul Wiltshire, come to you, then I'll go back to Councillor Bignell.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Actually, Councillor Elaine Wiltshire has stolen most of my thunder. I was going to comment that certainly at St Peter's in Brackley, which is a Grade 1 star listed building, that when the development next door was built, it was actually built on raised land, artificially raised land, with nothing between the house and the church. So I'm not too convinced about this argument of screening buildings from the church or vice versa.
All right, I'm just going to bring in Councillor Bignell, then Councillor Pritchard. Councillor Bignell.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Going back to these trees, I mean, Officer Dick said that we could condition it, but can we condition that we provide extra trees? Well, there's just a row of trees at the bottom of the garden. If they're prepared to plant some extra trees there to provide cover, then I might be more minded to go with this.
Well, I'm getting a sort of half nod from Samuel Dix on that one. Extra trees, I don't know how many extra you want. But,
yes, could I just show you the blue line again, just to clarify the area we're talking about? So the trees that lie outside the applicant's control are those on the boundary. That there are already trees within this blue line boundary that they do own. So these trees along the boundaries are the large ones that I showed you in these photos. But you can see beyond that there are already trees that are in the applicant's control. So really, the landscaping scheme is going to be an enhancement of the trees that are beyond the big trees, if that makes sense, within that area.
With respect, when I questioned the applicant, he indicated that wasn't in his control, that piece of land. Because I talked about the piece of land at the bottom of the garden, outside of the bottom of their red line, and he said outside the red line wasn't in his control.
I don't wish to speak on behalf of the applicant, but I did notice when he said that he referred to the northern boundary, which is obviously there. So I don't know if there might be some confusion on that.
I don't know, because I was indicating the church, so
the church,
northern boundary doesn't protect the church. So I was clearly indicating that, and my assumption, what he said, outside the red line was not in his control.
Well, we heard what he had to say. We can't ask him again because we've been through that. I'm going to turn to Councillor Pritchard. You've asked.
Thank you very much. With regards to this particular application, the design I think is quite acceptable. I think its location is quite acceptable. I'm a little bit concerned about, okay, I can appreciate listed buildings and so on, and with regards to hedges, but if the hedge come down, and from a perspective of viewing the particular church, what impact do you think that the HS2 is going to have on this particular church, which is only 1 or 2 kilometres away? So I don't know why we're getting so concerned about the views at the moment. But
that's policy. HS2 is not in front of us. Policy is we have to consider the impact on a listed building, and that listed building has to be there.
All right, thank you. Councillor Hollowell, you put your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify one point, something I said earlier. When I was referring to the design guide, I was referring to the design guide that the council adopted for the full district. That's quite different to the design guide that Andrew Longbottom devised some years ago for some of the Brackley estates, where there was maybe a more of an urban flavour involved. I'm referring to the big book, the big A3 booklet that applies to the entire district. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I saw Councillor Breeze's hand flicker, so let's go to her.
Thank you. So Officer Dix has referred to landscaping, and I'm sure that the applicant will be more than happy to beef up to whatever standard we require landscaping at the end of the garden under a condition that it's maintained to achieve the screening of the church that's required. It would be beyond comprehension that they would say, no, we're not doing that in return for not getting their permission. Could we give the officer delegated authority to give permission based on a satisfactory landscaping at that particular point?
Well, we obviously could, if the committee is so minded. Anyone else want to sort of jump in here? We've sort of say gone around the houses on this. We've only gone around one house, but anyone else got a view? Yeah, Councillor Elaine Wiltshire.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I think if we have the suggestion that Councillor Breeze has suggested put into the contract, I think that would be a good idea. And on that, I would propose that we accept the officer's recommendation to approve this property
With that condition and others. Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. A proposal. A seconder for it, please. Yes, Councillor Pritchard. Right. Well, there we are. So we're now going to move to a vote, and I'll get on Leslie to bring us in on this one. Leslie.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just, please, before we go to a vote, could I just confirm what everyone's voting for? This is for approval, and the extra condition, really, I wanted to ask about. I don't know if perhaps Samuel could help me with that.
Far be it for me to propose anything, but no. As I say, I already have a landscaping condition in condition 10. That is a standard condition. If members wish to amend that condition to specifically refer to the area closest to the church,
yes, I think the committee does wish that. He wishes to be strengthened such that there's not a forest, but at least adequate protection for the
So it would be to amend condition 10 to that effect.
Councillor Bignar, are you going to help here?
I suggested at the start, but I worry about the long term. I mean, you're right, you can condition it and they put some trees up, but trees die and fall down. Is there in this condition that this must be maintained in a certain way? I'm asking the question of the officer there, please, Chair.
Yeah. Can it be forevermore?
Quite often we have the landscape management condition. I'm just checking that was attached in this instance. Sorry, bear with me. Normally there are two conditions. There's one pertaining to a landscaping plan, then there's one regarding the retention of trees and their maintenance for a period of time afterwards. The trouble is this application has quite a few conditions, so I can't quite recall the order. Yeah, so condition 20 is landscape implementation and maintenance, and that relates to a 5-year period post-completion. If members wanted that extended, that would be acceptable as well, I'd suggest.
I get a feeling members probably do. Councillor Bignell?
I was going to say, I'd propose that we extend 5 years. 5 years is no time at all.
Well, how long? Do you want to put a figure on it then?
Well, I'm not technical enough to do that, Chair.
I think in the past we have had conditions that go on for 15 years maintenance.
Well, what should we settle on 15? Is that the mood of the meeting on that one?
Yeah.
All right. Well, there we are. That's that condition. So, Leslie, are you clear what we're?
Yeah. So we're condition 10, landscaping, is for enhanced landscaping. Yes. And condition 20, which is for maintenance, would be extended to 15 years from 5.
Yes. Is that agreeable to everybody before we start voting?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
good.
Yep,
That's
okey-doke.
encouraging. Right. Before.
Okay, we'll go for the vote then, shall we?
Yep. Yeah, go on.
Lovely. So that's we'll start with Councillor Bignell, please.
With the conditions for?
Councillor Breeze.
4.
Councillor Budden.
4.
Councillor Clark.
4.
Councillor Cooper.
4.
Councillor Dullin.
4.
Councillor Hollowell.
Abstain.
Councillor Johns.
4.
Councillor Pritchard.
4.
Councillor Samiotis.
4.
Councillor Surgeson Brooke didn't come back, did she? No.
No.
So Councillor Townsend.
Abstain.
Councillor Wiltshire. Sorry, Elaine Wiltshire. And Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
Abstain.
So what's the tally there? What's the scores on the doors?
That's 10-4, so that's been approved, Chairman.
And how many abstentions were there? I lost track there. 4? 3 abstentions.
3
abstentions, right, okay. All right, so there you are, 10-3. Well, thank you very much. So that has been carried. So there we go. We've only had 2 applications, but it's taken us a long time. There you go. It just fills the time, doesn't it? 20 to 6 is the time. So that's the end of this meeting. Of no urgent business, aside from telling you that we're going to meet again in the same format in 4 weeks' time, Thursday, the 4th of February, our penultimate meeting. So join us then. Thank you very much for this afternoon. And this ends the broadcast.
Thank you, Richard.